Hello everyone, and welcome to Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting series on what if Naruto awakened as Roku. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Kakashi Hitaki sighed as he looked over the report handed to him by the Hokage. It contained the information on the 3 genin he was going to test, and most likely fail. So, explain why you're giving me a genin team again considering what happened to the last 32, he asked the old man in front of him. Sarutobi chuckled. Well, I thought this time might be a bit different. After all, 2 of those genin are extremely special. You should know that. Kakashi nodded. The last Uchiha and the village Jinchuriki, who also happened to be his sensei's son, though you could count the number of people who knew the latter on one hand. Kakashi sighed. I guess I do owe Sensei and Obito. But if even so, if they don't understand what it means to be a shinobi, then they don't deserve to be one, no matter who they are. Alright, I guess I don't have a choice, though Naruto might be an interesting character. Mastering Kage Bunshin in a single night is quite an accomplishment. Yes, it is impressive, though that isn't the main reason why you should keep an eye on him, Sarutobi said. After that incident, he's changed. Mentally anyway, he still looks the same and sounds the same, but it's like his personality has changed almost fundamentally. When I first saw this, I checked the seal with his permission. There wasn't any weakening or any change for that matter. I'm not sure what happened, but I think his mastery of Kage Bunshin may have something to do with it. It's not really a bad change. Just be ready for some weird stuff. He'll probably surprise you. Okay, surprise? I'd like to see that. As Kakashi stopped at the door to the classroom. 3 hours later, of course, he noticed a sound coming from inside. TK, 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 TK. If he had to guess, Kakashi would say that it sounded like a pencil being tapped against a desk. He was about to open the door when he heard a voice from inside. Naruto Baka. Stop tapping that damn pencil, it's been 3 hours, said the shrill voice of a girl. Must be the Haruno girl. The tapping then stopped. Kakashi heard a stressed, "Thank you," from inside. He was about to open it again when he heard another sound. TK 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 TK. Kakashi's sweat dropped and quickly opened the door in order to prevent possible bloodshed. As he did, however, he felt a strange rushing of air, and the next thing he knew, he was sitting at a desk in the room. Before he had time to register any of this, a fist connected with his face, sending him into the adjacent aisle. Regaining his bearings and getting to his feet, Kakashi saw a young girl, frozen in shock with her fist outstretched, having not moved since hitting him. Glancing over to where he was standing, he noticed a young boy with blonde spiky hair standing at the door with a satisfied smirk on. Realizing he had just been the unwilling subject of a kawarimi, Kakashi spoke. Well, my first impression of you is, I hate you. Come to the roof. He then poofed away. A few minutes later, Kakashi was sitting on the rail on the edge of the roof, the 3 would-be genin sitting on the steps in front of them. Kakashi examined his new charges. Sitting on the far right, from his perspective, was black-haired, which kind of resembled a chicken butt boy with a brooding expression. He had black eyes and was wearing a navy blue shirt and white pants with his headband tied around his forehead. The last, well, second to last, Uchiha, Sasuke. Sitting next to him was a pink-haired girl with green eyes wearing a red dress and her hite tied around the top of her head. She would occasionally shoot a dreamy glance at Sasuke. Sakura Haruno according to the file. And finally, sitting next to Sakura was the blonde that had Kawaramid with him to avoid the former's wrath. Naruto Uzumaki. He did bear a striking resemblance to his father, with his blonde, spiky hair and blue eyes. He was wearing a plain black t-shirt and plain black pants with his headband tied around his neck. His sitting position alone said how accurate or inaccurate as it was, his profile was and how much he had apparently changed. According to his profile, Naruto probably should have been sitting up with barely contained energy. Instead, Naruto had sat down on the top step and was now laying on his back, staring up at the sky, looking bored. Alright, I guess we'll all introduce ourselves. Pinky, you first. Sakura looked annoyed at the nickname but didn't comment on it. Instead, she looked confused. Sensei, what exactly are we supposed to say? Okay, just how did she get such high marks at the academy? You know, name, likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future. Well then, why don't you go first, sensei? Naruto spoke up. You're still awake? Sasuke said in a mocking tone. Nope, Naruto replied, leaving everyone thinking, huh? Well, my name's Kakashi Hitaki. I really don't have any likes or dislikes. Dreams for the future, well, I do have some hobbies. So all we learned is his name, huh? Wait, why'd I care? Oh well. Alright Pinky, you're up. My name is Sakura Haruno. My likes are Sasuke-kun. My dislikes are Ino, Buddha and Naruto Baka. She pretty much yelled while glaring at Naruto. Do I look like I care? And since we all know that her hobbies are stalking Sasuke and her dream is to rape him, can we just move on? I'd rather listen to her mindless fangirl ranting as little as possible. Naruto spoke up. Sakura looked like she was shocked and ticked at the same time, while Sasuke just looked surprised. Kakashi realized that the Hokage hadn't been kidding about the kid changing so much if his classmates were this shocked by his behavior. He decided to follow the kid's advice. The girl was getting annoying. Okay Emo, you're up? Sasuke looked annoyed for a second, but quickly schooled his face into one of the brooding emo that he was. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I don't have any likes or dislikes. My hobbies are training. I don't have a dream. It's more of an ambition. To kill a certain man, and to revive my clan. No you won't, Naruto said again. Apparently, this was a sore spot for Sasuke because he immediately glared at the blonde and spoke in a low voice with venom. And just why won't I? Because you can't electrocute a ghost, that's why. Only one thought was going through everyone's head. WTF. Alright, on that note, how about you go next? Silence, you still awake there? Yeah. I'm just thinking of what to say. Well, my name's Naruto Uzumaki, that's Maelstrom, not Fishpaste for the 206th time. He said, yelled, still from his reclined position. My likes, wow, pretty small list, I guess old man Sarutobi and Iruka-sensei considering they don't treat me like shit. And ramen, good stuff that. My dislikes, much bigger list, pretty much everyone in this village since they treat me like shit. Sasuke, since he's an arrogant, stuck-up prick, and Sasuke fangirls since they're annoying, whiny bitches who have no concept of being quiet for 2 seconds or even communicating in something other than screaming. I'm sitting right next to you. Sakura screamed at him, and kind of proved his point too from Kakashi's perspective, while Sasuke just smirked. At least he had realized the truth of the fangirl. I'm sorry, did you say something? I couldn't hear anything over the incessant screaming. Deciding to defuse the situation before Sakura tried to brutally murder Naruto and himself or Sasuke getting targeted for possible kawarimi, Kakashi spoke up again. And, your dreams for the future? Ah yes, Naruto replied as he sat up and glanced around as if thinking about his answer. What is my dream? Burn Konoha to the soil maybe? Everyone looked at him, unease very apparent in their eyes, Kakashi especially. Just kidding, he said as he laid back down. I guess my dream would be. Be what? Melon, Naruto yelled as he sat up, scaring the shit out of everyone and almost making Kakashi fall off the railing. After everyone recovered, they looked at him like he was mentally retarded. In a way, he was. Melon? Kakashi asked. Your dream is, melon. Naruto crossed his arms and looked serious. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Baka. What kind of a dream is that? Sakura screamed as she got ready to punch him again. As her fist collided with Naruto's head however, he burst into smoke revealing Sasuke, who flew back about 10 feet with a very large bump on his head. As Sakura tried to digest what just happened, something that made Kakashi once again question her IQ level considering Naruto had done the same thing 5 minutes ago, Naruto spoke up from behind her. Well, I suppose that's one way to knock him out so you can rape him. Though I'd say tranquilizer darts would probably work much better. Sakura, apparently more concerned with Sasuke than the fact that Naruto had just made her slug him in the face, ran over to the emo as he got to his feet, glaring daggers at Naruto all the while. As Kakashi observed all this, he made a mental assessment of this team. Let's see, an emo, his fangirl, and a bipolar Junshiriki. Well, I guess they have some potential. I guess we'll see during the survival test. Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi looked up to see Naruto hanging from the large awning over the roof. Sasuke and Sakura trying to pull him down, probably to pummel him. A little help, please? As his sweat dropped, Kakashi cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. Well, now that we're all done introducing ourselves, I think it's time to discuss the matter of your graduation test. This had the desired effect as this new prospect immediately grabbed Sasuke's attention, and Sakura seemed to have the attention span of a nail since Naruto was out of reach, either that or she was just mimicking Sasuke. But sensei, we already passed our genin test. That was only a test of whether or not you have the skill to become ninja. Whether or not you're worthy to become shinobi is up to your Junin sensei, aka, me. So what is this test of yours? Naruto asked as he dropped to the ground. It's a survival training test. I won't say any more than that. Be at training field 7 tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Oh, and don't eat breakfast. You'll just throw up. As the man poofed away, a variety of thoughts were going through the heads of the genin. Though more thoughts were going through the head of one than his companions. I must pass this test. To defeat him, I have to pass this test, otherwise I'll never get close to Sasuke-kun. Well. Survival training? Against a Junin? This should be fun? Aw man. Survival training? Against a Junin? I hope we do okay? This will difficult, we will have to do some planning. Cool. Maybe we'll get to test out the new jutsus, and maybe see some new ones. The paint cans are attacking. The paint cans are attacking, I tell you. Kakashi calmly strode through Konoha. It really was a nice morning. The birds were singing. The sky was clear, and he'd get to mess with the heads of and or beat the shit out of little kids once again. Today was going to be fun. He had no idea who he was messing with. Observing the training field from a tree, he found his 3 new charges, most of whom seemed to be extremely bored. Sasuke was standing against the center post, brooding, like he ever does anything else, except train and run from his fangirls of course. Sakura was sitting against the post to his left, staring dreamily at Sasuke. Again, like she does anything else. Naruto, where was Naruto? Glancing over to the third pole, Kakashi noticed something sticking out from behind it. A pair of legs and feet lying on the ground. Sleeping Well, he's got more sense than the other two. If this keeps up, I'll probably have to just throw that file on him away. Deciding to make himself known, Kakashi jumped down from the tree he was in. Sakura, upon noticing him, immediately made her mood clear, and everyone else temporarily deaf. You're late. Removing his fingers from his ears, Kakashi started on one of his genius, to him anyway, excuse speeches. Sorry, a black cat crossed my path and I had to take the long way to be safe. As everyone looked at him like he was crazy, a voice sounded from behind the post. Are you sure that was smart? I thought you had to go back to your house, sacrifice a lamb, then kill the cat, bury it in the exact place it crossed you, then take the long way, Naruto said as he got up from behind the post, confusing everyone even more. He had apparently gotten new clothes since the day before. He now wore black combat pants with black combat boots. He also wore black and dark orange unzipped jacket over the black t-shirt from the day before. Whoa. Never got that reaction before. Well, yeah, but I was short on time and just taking the long way works, there's just no guarantee. Ah, Naruto nodded in agreement. Baka, you actually believe him? Sakura yelled at him. Nope. I just thought I'd go along with it, Naruto replied. Deciding to defuse the situation before things got violent, again, Kakashi brought a pair of bells from his ninja pouch. Alright, here's how the test is going to work, he said, getting everyone's attention. There are 2 bells here. Your mission is to take them from me. This will be full combat. You can use anything in your arsenal against me, and you'll have to come at me with the intent to kill if you want any chance. Sasuke's and Sakura's eyes widened at this, while Naruto just smirked. Intent to kill Sweet. Well, it's a good thing we made preparations. He'll regret doing that. Oh yeah. We're going to make him regret saying that. Tying the bells to his belt and pulling a pair of bentos from his pouch, Kakashi walked over to the memorial stone and placed them in front of it. At noon, those who didn't get a bell will be tied to a post, while those that did will get to eat these in front of them. If nobody gets a bell, then I'll eat them in front of you. Two stomachs grumbled while Naruto just snickered and spoke in a sing-song voice. That's what y'all get for not listening to me, or thinking for that matter. And there's one more thing, Kakashi said. If you fail to get a bell, not only will you be tied to a post and not get to eat lunch, but you'll also be sent back to the academy. Now everyone's eyes widened, though Naruto's quickly seemed to harden into one of contemplation. But sensei, there's only 2 bells, Sakura said, unease obvious in her voice. Wow. She can count? Amazing, Naruto said, making her glare at him. Well, yeah. One of you will be going back to the academy. That's why you'll have to come at me with the intent to kill. Not 1 second after he finished speaking, Naruto drew a kunai and drew back his hand to throw it. However, he found his hand suddenly bound, and Kakashi no longer in front of him. Geez. Don't be so hasty. I never said to start, Kakashi said, one hand binding Naruto's wrist, the other on his head. Naruto simply smirked. I know. I just thought I'd test the waters, said a very familiar voice from behind Kakashi. Behind Kakashi was another Naruto, this one with a kunai to his back. Glancing behind him, Kakashi smirked under his mask. Having a clone draw me out so you could ambush? You're smarter than you let on? Well, isn't deception part of being a shinobi? The Naruto behind him said. Sasuke and Sakura were currently gaping at the display of cunning Naruto had just shown, but before they could do anything, Kakashi spoke. All right then, start. The Naruto in front of Kakashi instantly drew a kunai with his free hand and spun around, slashing across Kakashi's chest while the other stabbed him his kunai. However, Kakashi poofed into a log. Looking to Sasuke and Sakura, the Narutos found they were already gone, hidden in the foliage. Stowing their kunai, the Narutos ran off in a seemingly random direction. Up in the trees, blue eyes gazed upon the situation. In another clearing, Kakashi stood, seemingly bored as he read his orange book. Suddenly, several kunai came flying out of the trees, which the Junin dodged easily, along with a flying kick from Naruto. Catching Naruto's leg, Kakashi hurled him into a tree, dispelling the clone. You think just because you have shadow clones, you can go toe-to-toe with a Junin? Kakashi taunted. Well, no, but I do have few advantages, the Naruto in front of him said, like this. With that, a hail of kunai came flying out of the trees. Kakashi simply leapt upward, dodging the knives. However, as the weapons passed under him, they all were enveloped in smoke to reveal Naruto clones. The clones brought out 6 kunai each and threw them upward at the Junin, only to impale a large log. As Kakashi landed, he sped into the group of clones, slicing them with his own kunai. After they were all dispelled, Kakashi was left all alone in the clearing. So, not only does he adapt on the fly, he also stays out of the battle so he can assess the situation. He's probably up in the trees now trying to think of a way to counterattack. He's definitely a sharp kid, but even then, if he can't figure out the purpose of this test, he's got no purpose being a shinobi. Before he could leave, however, another hail of kunai came down on the Junin, along with more Naruto clones. Little did Kakashi know, but figure out the test was exactly what Naruto was trying to do right now. Hidden far from the area of battle on pretty much the other side of the forest that was the training area, Naruto sat against a tree, trying to think of a way to pass Kakashi's test. As he contemplated, a voice sounded in his head. Chief. It's no good. There's no way we can beat him at our current level. Any luck on figuring out how to pass? No, I haven't come up with anything yet. All teams, how much longer can you stall him? Naruto thought out his mental reply, order to the clones in question. A second later, 5 replies reached him. Fire Team Alphas at 85 feet, Fire Team Betas at 91 feet. Fire Team Charlies at 87 feet, Fire Team Deltas at 83 feet. Fire Team Echoes at 85 feet. Naruto thought over what he had just heard. Suddenly, a new message arrived. Chief. He's moving out. What? Damn it, alright. Fire Teams Beta and Charlie, send out scouts and track him. All other teams, stand by and await further orders. Yes, sir. At that time, roughly 2 miles from Naruto's position, a grand total of 7 clones stood in the trees above the ground, hidden from sight from those on the ground, one of the clones in a sitting position with his hands making the ram seal with his eyes closed. The clone got to his feet and made a series of hand signs to another one, the other 5 being gathered around the second. The first clone made the hand sign for Kage Bunshin, followed by a gesture to his eyes, then covered his left eye with his hand, then swiped his hand across his neck and tapped his ear and pointed up. The second clone nodded and created 2 Bunshin. The Bunshin nodded and leapt off through the trees. At the same time, another group of clones were doing the same thing, while 3 other groups were doing just neck swiping onward, without creating any new Bunshin. Sasuke swore as he knocked down again by Kakashi. He was getting his ass kicked. Wasn't he the rookie of the year? Heck, even the dead last had gotten some good hits in. If the dead last could do it, why couldn't he? Damn it. Sasuke swore as he made hand signs, surprising Kakashi. Kaiten. Gukaku no Jutsu. Sasuke cried as he spat a giant fireball at the Junin. When the smoke cleared, Kakashi was nowhere to be found. Did I get him? Suddenly, however, a pair of hands grabbed his feet and dragged him underground up to his neck. Looking up, he saw Kakashi staring down at him, obviously smirking. You know, maybe you should try taking some pages from Naruto's book. Or are you just too good to be imitating the dead last? Kakashi said as he turned to leave. Neither one of them noticed the blonde boy watching them from the trees. Commander. He's incapacitated Sasuke. He's moving out now. I recorded some interesting information. I'll send it back now. A puff of smoke later and all trace of the clone's existence was gone. Naruto smirked as the information from the clone that witnessed Sasuke's battle was relayed to him. Gukaku yeah. That should come in handy. His smirk changed into a groan of exasperation as he was relayed the information concerning Sakura's, battle. Well, more like a pathetic knockout. That in turn changed to one of seriousness as a clone relayed a message to him. Sir. Kakashi's been sighted in the clearing from before. If we don't move now, he may come after us next. Any luck on what he wants? Our teamwork alone just isn't going to cut it. I know. Wait, teamwork, yeah, that may be it, Chief? I figured it out. All teams, prepare to move. Charlie team, locate Sakura and brief her on the situation. Delta team, do the same for Sasuke. We'll need them for this. Fire teams Alpha, Beta and Echo, engage Operation WTF. Understood, sir. A dark smirk spread across Naruto's face. Alright, sensei. Let's see ya squirm. In the middle of the clearing, Kakashi stood, reading his porn. Little did he know, he was in for the shock of his life. Suddenly, Kakashi jumped out of the way of a hail of kunai. Doing the same thing over and over isn't going to get the job done, Naruto. He taunted. Maybe you show. He was cut off as he was forced to dodge a sofa. What the? This was quickly followed by tables, chairs, trees, roof tiles, more chairs, stuffed cats, real cats and many other random objects. As Kakashi dodged a lawnmower, he yelled out the question anyone would be asking themselves. Where is he getting this stuff? Deciding to test a theory, he hit an oncoming telephone pole with a kunai. The pole poofed away. So he's having his Bunshin henge into random objects and throwing them at me. Okay, this kid has issues. Though it is effective. What the? His train of thought stopped as about 200 clones all jumped high into the air above him. The clones all made the ram hand sign and Kakashi tensed as he prepared for an attack. It would be a futile effort. The clones cried out as smoke obscured them. Tajuu Bunshin henge. As the smoke cleared, Kakashi's mouth dropped and he thought only one thing. WTF. Trojan bunny. The clones had hanged into a giant wooden rabbit that was now falling on Kakashi. Realizing that this could be a serious threat if he didn't do something, Kakashi made hand signs as the bunny fell on him. Rakery. The legendary lightning blade easily cut through the hanged clones, dispelling the large rabbit. In the trees above him, only one thought was going through several clones' heads. Operation WTF. Success. Sasuke struggled to dig himself out of the hole Kakashi had buried him in. He was just about to yell out in anger when he heard chuckling. So, the great rookie of the year, buried up to his neck in dirt. Man, I wish I had a camera right now, said Naruto standing up in a tree above the clearing. What do you want, dead last? You know, if I'm the dead last, and you're worse off than me, what does that make you? The undead last. Okay, bad pun. Look, do you want my help or not? Sasuke looked surprised for a second, then schooled his expression. I don't need your help, you'll just weigh me down. Well, with that attitude you'll never pass Kakashi's test. Look, I'm only doing this because we all need to fight him in order to pass. Hear me out, and I'll dig you out, okay? Okay. Good. Naruto then created a clone which then coweramied with Sasuke, causing him to be pretty much warped out of the hole. It saves effort, Naruto explained. Okay, what is this plan of yours? Alright. Kakashi said that we have to get a bell to pass, and there are only 2 of us. Therefore, only 2 of us can pass, right? Yeah. I know that. Sasuke replied. Wrong. How many genin teams have you seen that are composed of less than 3 genin and 1 junin? Watching Sasuke contemplate this, Naruto continued. Exactly. You haven't. That's because there are none, excluding those that have lost a member. If you remember from our history lessons, when the Shoden first came up with this system, he made it law that all new genin teams would be composed of 3 genin and 1 junin sensei. The only one that can override that law is the Hokage in special circumstances. So unless Kakashi is bluffing, he's committing a federal offense. So he must be bluffing, Naruto explained. Sasuke was now looking at him like he had just grown wings, tails and giant spikes out of his spine. Naruto's sweat dropped. Look, let's just say some things happened and now I'm a lot smarter than before. But we don't have time to talk about it. Sasuke quickly schooled his face again. So what's your point? My point is that it's all or nothing. Either we all pass or none of us pass. And here's how we do it. This test is supposed to test our teamwork. The bells are only a diversion to split us up. What he wants is for all 3 of us to make a combined effort to get the bells. In other words, teamwork. If we do that, then we'll pass. I guarantee it. You sure about this? Positive. The chief's a lot smarter than you give him credit for. Now come on. Another team's getting Sakura. We're meeting near the main clearing, Naruto said as he turned to run off. Wait. Who's this, Chief? Sasuke asked as he followed him. The original, of course. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention I'm just a clone. Sasuke was gaping, but quickly followed the clone. He never noticed the clone that had switched with him now looked like him. Near the said clearing, Naruto watched as Kakashi dispatched another wave of clones, these having hanged in ostriches. A message from the retrieval teams then reached him. Chief. We're in position. Good. All teams, commence operation, double cross. Yes, sir. Kakashi was bored and extremely weirded out at this point. He had dispatched wave after wave of clones, all of them hanged into everything from giant living trees to elephants to large carts pulled by donkeys. He was also extremely confused as to what the heck Naruto was trying to accomplish. What he was doing obviously wasn't working. What is he planning? He's obviously stalling for something, but what is it? It was then that Kakashi heard something coming from the memorial stone. The sound of ripping plastic. That little sneak, sunshining over to the stone, he found Naruto opening one of the bentos. Kakashi shook his head. He had expected better of someone who had appeared so sharp. Well well. What have we here? Kakashi said as he jumped on the stone above Naruto. Trying to cheat and get lunch early? Well, we can't have that, can we? Kakashi grabbed Naruto and created a pair of cage bunshin to get Sasuke and Sakura. It was time to teach them a lesson. Kakashi looked over his 3 charges, all of them tied to the poles. I have to say, I am very disappointed in all of you. You never even got close to what this test meant, did you? Well, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto spoke up, there's one thing you're forgetting. Oh, and what exactly am I forgetting? Kakashi asked. We haven't lost yet, huh? Kakashi asked, wondering what he meant, when a hail of kunai came at him. Realization dawning on him, the Junin ducked under the barrage and looked around. You didn't, his eyes wide. We did, Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura all said in the same voice before going poof. Looking around the clearing, Kakashi saw he was surrounded by dozens of clones, all of them hanged into either Naruto, Sakura, or Sasuke. All right. Let's go, one of the Narutos yelled. They charge. Kakashi drew a pair of kunai and began hacking through the clones, until he heard a familiar yell. Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu. Sasuke yelled as he let loose a massive fireball, followed by a cloud of kunai and shuriken by Naruto and Sakura. Kakashi dodged the first few kunai and was about to jump away when he noticed something. He couldn't move. The kunai that he had dodged had really been hanged clones, that were now holding him down. Quickly running through hand seals, Kakashi cried out. Suiten. Suijinheki. A large wall of water appeared around him, shielding from the fireball. As the wall fell, Kakashi, panting, looked to the 3 genin in front of him, the clones having spread out and dispelled their henge. So Kakashi-sensei, do we pass? Said a smirking Naruto. Well, you never got any bells, Kakashi said. Actually, Naruto said before disappearing in a poof, making Kakashi check his belt. The bells were gone. Glancing behind him, Kakashi gaped, along with Sasuke and Sakura. Standing on the lake behind them, were easily 100 Narutos. The clones parted, as one of them walked through, the 2 bells resting in his hand. We did. With that he snapped his fingers. Hundreds of Narutos appeared on the trees around them, popped out of the ground, and came out of the water. While Sasuke and Sakura stood gaping, Kakashi shook his head. This is the first time we've seen you today, hasn't it? Yep. Even the Naruto that was waiting here was one. I've been at least 200 feet from any of you this entire time. With that, Naruto tossed the bells to Sasuke and Sakura. So as I was saying, do we pass? Hey, I guess you do, Kakashi replied. Kakashi carefully concealed his presence as he stood on the edge of a large clearing not unlike the one he had been in a few minutes ago. After passing them, his students had gone their separate ways. Sasuke had headed off to the Uchiha district to train, Sakura following him like a giant magnet. However, there was still something Kakashi needed to check on, and some answers he needed. Flashback. Hey, I guess you do, Kakashi replied. Naruto and Sasuke smirked and Sakura cheered. Naruto then surprised everyone again by closing his eyes and holding his hands in the ram sign. As it on K, all of the clones did the exact same thing. Then, all of the clones suddenly disintegrated, and they didn't create the normal poof of white smoke that usually accompanied the dispelling of a clone. Instead, they seemed to simply evaporate into thin air. Not unlike the concealment genjutsu Kurenai used, Kakashi noted. Making sure none of his genin were looking, Kakashi pulled his Hite 8 up to reveal his other eye. A fully matured Sharingan, the final, parting gift from his teammate, Obito Uchiha. Looking on with his partial Dujutsu active, Kakashi gasped at what he saw. The clones were being converted back into pure chakra. The basic theory of the Bunshin Jutsu was molding pure chakra into an ethereal construct that looked to be the original, but had no physical form. The theory of the Kage Bunshin was molding so much chakra that the construct it created had a physical form. Though most of the bodily functions, such as breathing and sleeping, were outside the reach of the construct, it retained the ability to think, to a degree. Most Kage Bunshin did not have the ability to achieve thought processes on the same level as their creator, though all memories gained through their life would be funneled back to the user upon their dispelling. In short, Kage Bunshin took far more chakra to create than normal Bunshin. What Kakashi was seeing right now was nothing short of incredible. The chakra the clones were being converted into was flowing back into Naruto. The boy was currently the center of a mystifying swirling vortex of blue chakra as the clones evaporated. Kakashi was awed by the display, since he was the only one who could see it thanks to his Sharingan. Naruto had done what no one else had done before. He had found a way to return the chakra consumed by using Kage Bunshin, making the total net loss practically zero. What was also incredible was that Kakashi noticed that each clone seemed to be being converted into more chakra than a normal clone should have. Meaning that Naruto's clones were made up of more chakra than usual. After about 30 seconds, the display ended as the last of the chakra funneled into Naruto's tenketsu. With that, he brushed imaginary dust off of his jacket, turned around and walked off. See ya. I'm going to go do some training. End flashback. Now, Kakashi was standing on the edge of the secluded training spot he had followed Naruto to. Whatever training he was doing, Naruto didn't want any observers. Kakashi knew he should be respecting his students' privacy, but too many things didn't add up. Something did happen that night when he learned the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, and Kakashi needed to find out what. if nothing else, to gauge his skill and abilities. Or rather when Team 7 found themselves in a combat situation, Kakashi, as their commander, would need to know how Naruto's skills could be utilized. Naruto now stood in the middle of the field. He had found this spot a few days before when he was looking for a secluded spot to train. This large field was around 6 acres and was situated on top of the Hokage mountain, directly behind and to the right, from the rest of the village's perspective, of the Yondaime's head. It was far away from any kind of settlement. The closest was a small cluster of observation centers and a weather station behind the Yondaime's head. There wasn't even a path there. There was a small lake with a waterfall on the eastern side that fed into a stream that ran through the clearing. Naruto hadn't explored past the waterfall, though he intended to at some point. Along with several large rocks and the dense surrounding forest to muffle noise, it made a perfect training area for him. Naruto made the cross-shaped hand sign, and roughly 1,000 clones appeared, filling up a third of the clearing. "All right," Naruto shouted to the clones. "We're making a slight change this time. Teams Alpha and Beta, start taijutsu practice. Cubia and Delta, you've got ninjutsu. Echo and Fichel, practice henge. Gamma and Halo, work on speed. Ines and Django, practice the chakra pulse. Now let's get to work." The clones uttered a cry of, "Yes sir," while raising their right hand in front of their forehead in some kind of salute and divided themselves into groups of about 200. The first group moved to the left of the field and began taijutsu sparring. The second group moved out onto the lake and stood in front of the waterfall. They started making hand seals and shooting large fireballs into it. The third group moved to the left side of the field and began hengeing into different things, mainly combination henges. The next group moved into the woods, while the final group spread out around the entire clearing, all doing something. Kakashi couldn't discern what. When all this was done, Naruto breathed out and spoke. "Since you're obviously curious about my changes, why don't you come out and ask me yourself, Kakashi-sensei?" Kakashi's eyes widened, but quickly schooled his expression as he walked out into the open. "So how long did you know I was there? You should know that concealment technique is used by Anbu. Even some Junin can't see through it." Naruto smirked and pointed up into the trees. Kakashi looked to see a bit of blonde hair visible before disappearing. "From the moment you started following me," Kakashi's visible eye widened. "And as for it being Anbu, well, I did design the Rakan clone by observing Anbu and high-level Junin." "Rakan clone?" Kakashi said. "Sigh. Well, I'm guessing you're here to get an estimation of my abilities since all previous information on me has pretty much gone down the drain. Am I wrong?" Naruto said. "That's correct," Kakashi replied. Once again, Naruto had surprised him, this time with an incredibly innate sense of perception as well as skill. "Well, guess I'll start with Kage Bunshin, since it's the only real major skill I have," Naruto said as he leaned against one of the large rocks. Kakashi leaned against another. "You're familiar with the basic theory of Kage Bunshin, correct?" Naruto asked. Kakashi nodded. "Good. Since Kage Bunshin are composed completely of chakra, I've found a way to alter the mix of chakra as well as the amount to change their physical capabilities," Naruto began. Before Kakashi could react, Naruto pointed to the first 2 groups of clones that were sparring. Kakashi noticed that even though they had struck each other multiple times, none of the clones had been dispelled. "The tank clone, as I call them. I've readjusted the chakra used to create them so that they have far increased physical mass and density, making them much harder to destroy. They're even tougher than me. In exchange, they have almost no chakra control and can't use any form of jutsu." Pointing to the clones using Gukakyu, Naruto continued. "Those are the casters. As their name suggests, they specialize in using ninjutsu. I altered the chakra mix so that they have far more chakra reserves than normal, as well as having very good control over it. In exchange, they're very easy to destroy, but like the tanks, they have their uses." "What about those Rakan clones you talked about?" "Ah yes. Those were pretty hard to make. With the way I've altered the mix of chakra, their physical density, strength, chakra stores, and general combat abilities have been reduced to near zero. In exchange, they have incredibly high senses of sight, smell and hearing. They can also travel at very high speeds, thus making them the perfect scouts." Kakashi nodded, but then spoke. "You can probably tell me about this later, but what I really wanted to talk to you about was what happened last week, when you became a shinobi. Ah, Naruto answered. The old man didn't tell you about it? Kakashi shook his head. No, he said it would be better to ask you. He said that you would be able to explain better than he could. All right then, Naruto said as he looked up to the sky, the memories of that fateful night coming back to him. The day that had changed his whole life, forever. Flashback. 6 days earlier. Konoha Ninja Academy. 1025 hours. Naruto sat at his desk, practically overflowing with anticipation. He was definitely going to pass this year. He knew it. He had been pouring almost all of his free time into practicing the Bunshin Jutsu. And he knew he had it to where he could pass. With all the time and effort he had put into those 3 jutsus, there was no way he could fail. They had started the testing about 30 minutes ago, and about half of the class had already gone. Naruto was always one of the last to go, for some reason. Shikamaru Nara. Mizuki called. Said boy groaned as he got up and walked down towards the front, muttering something like, troublesome. As Shikamaru took the exam, Naruto began staring off into space. His thoughts wandered back to those weird dreams he'd been having the past few days. They were, to put things bluntly, weird as hell. For the most part, Naruto's dreams were nothing special. They'd have him doing things like becoming Hokage, Sakura finally seeing how much better he was than that bastard Sasuke, or him eating a whole lot of ramen. But these were different. They had started 5 days ago, and had been greatly different each night. The first night had been peaceful, if there was any word that Naruto could describe it with. He had seen a lush green landscape, crisscrossed with rivers and streams. They originated from a massive waterfall that fell from a great cliff that went around in a complete circle. The streams flowed to the center of this great pit, and dropped again into a large lake, itself a perfect circle as well. In the center of this lake was a small island, a simple mound of sand sticking out of the water. Kneeling on this island, his head held low and his eyes closed, was a boy, the same age as him, with long blue hair that fell down his back and in front of his eyes in 2 strands. He was wearing a navy blue shirt along with a white hakama and simple sandals. From his shoulders fell a white haori. Something was strapped to his right hip, but Naruto didn't get a good look at it. The boy then raised his head, opening his ocean blue eyes filled with kindness and caring, and gazed up at the sky, a smile on his face. Naruto had gasped at what he saw then. The boy's cheeks were crossed with 3 lines each, just like Naruto. Please tell me, where are you? The boy spoke, as if asking the heavens themselves. With that the dream had ended. The second night had been downright scary in Naruto's opinion. He stood in what he could only describe as a hellish wasteland. Trees lay burning, the ground was singed. The ruins of some once great city lay around him. The remains of buildings stood burning. The sky was pitch black from an incredible amount of smoke. All around him, fire seemed to burn. Even on the ground itself, some flames burned. Then, he saw more. Bodies. Dead ones, hundreds were strewn around him. All in great piles that were themselves on fire. A great laughter caught Naruto's attention and he turned to its source. What he saw would normally have made him cringe. The largest pile of bodies, hundreds of them, in what seemed to have once been the city's main square. Behind it was a massive castle that was also in flames. Scattered around the pile were dozens of flaming crosses. All had a corpse nailed to them. Then Naruto noticed something about the castle. Atop its ramparts were more flaming crosses, a corpse nailed to each and every one. Great poles rising from the ramparts, from which great banners might once have flown, were now decorated with yet more corpses, impaled from groin to head. Atop the highest spire of the castle stood the origin of the laughter. A boy no older than Naruto stood atop a great cross at the top of the spire, to which a final body was nailed, this one of a man in expensive clothing. The city's ruler probably. Upon closer inspection, however, Naruto realized that the man was not nailed to the cross. The cross, made of thin metal rods, had been impaled through the man. The vertical rod through his torso, the horizontal one through his arms. The boy atop the cross cackled madly. He had fiery red hair that spiked in many directions, but mostly towards the back and onto his neck. His eyes were a bright crimson and gazed out upon the destruction with sadistic glee. He was garbed in black, demonic armor that had the appearance of scales or some kind of dragon or demon hide, complete with claws on the hands. On each shoulder was a large spike from which 3 smaller spikes emerged. Falling from the top of the spine were 3 chain-like tassels that resembled tails of some kind. In his right hand, he held a massive demonic scythe. The large weapon had a tapered point on the bottom, from which a vine-like pattern crept up the metal shaft. At the top, there were large metal spikes, each one about a foot long. The blade itself seemed to be as tall as the user's forearm and at least twice as long. Then Naruto noticed a final detail. On the boy's cheeks were the same whisker-like marks that he had. "Where are you, whelp? Where are you?" The figure cackled, a mad grin on his face. That was when Naruto had woken up. The next dream had been interesting, if a little weird. He had stood in a massive cave. Actually, massive didn't do it justice. This cave was huge. Naruto was pretty sure most if not all of Konoha could have fit inside it. And it was probably a few miles in height too. The cave had obviously been made by humans. The walls, floor and ceiling were all made of white marble. The whole room was illuminated by strange stones that gave off a bluish-green glow. Some rested on pedestals that stood in niches in the walls, while other, larger ones hung from the ceiling or stood on large pedestals rising from the floor. About halfway up the wall was a walkway that ringed the entire room. Large staircases descended from this walkway to a lower level about 20 feet below it. This level was a large floor and held several of the crystals that illuminated the room. From this one, more staircases descended to yet another lower level. This cycle continued, a few dozen times or more until it reached the level Naruto was on. On some of the walls on these descending levels, Naruto could see wrought iron doors that seemed to lead to long hallways made of the same marble. Each level, along with the whole room, was perfectly square. From Naruto's position, more levels descended further until finally reaching the bottom. On the lowest level, a massive spire rose upwards. The spire was huge, reaching easily to roughly halfway up into the chasm, which would be a mile at the least. The spire covered almost the entire bottom floor, probably an acre or 2. The spire was made of the same white marble as everything else, with large, column-like pieces coming from its corners and sides, 8 total. It was vaguely pyramid-like in shape, its sides slanting inward at occasional intervals. In some places, starting at roughly a third of the way up, part of the center column would be missing. In these spaces were massive crystals like the other ones that lit the room, only these were completely white and about 50 times bigger than any of the others. At the very top was the biggest crystal of them all. It had to be at least the size of the Hokage Tower, and it was shaped like a massive blooming flower. The crystal was a bluish white, and semi-transparent with 4 conical pieces, each roughly the size of a person, rising from around the center and curving back to make a semi-shielded space in the exact center of the crystal. Then Naruto saw it. Like both of his previous dreams, there was a boy his age here. The boy sat in the exact center of the crystal, his legs crossed and his eyes closed. Like both of his previous dreams, even though he was far away from the boy, he could clearly make out his features. He had messy brown hair that fell down onto his neck from the sides and back, and had whisker-like scars just like Naruto. He wore what seemed to be leather armor. His arms were covered with a multitude of black leather belts, with open brass vambracers on his wrists. A leather cuirass covered his torso, while curved brass plates rested on his shoulders. On his lower back hung a brass circular piece with a pair of rods coming from its sides. From this circular piece fell a long tassel-like cloth. His legs were covered similarly to his arms, with the same colored brass boots. On his back, with no visible form of attachment, rested a massive zanbatsu. Suddenly the boy opened his eyes, a shade of brown identical to his hair and filled with a calm seriousness and wisdom, and spoke in a low voice. "So, where are you? Can you see me? Where do you gaze from?" With that, he woke up. Naruto was broken from his thoughts by the high-pitched, fangirlish squealing by most of the girls in the class. Sasuke had passed apparently. Naruto's eyes unconsciously traveled to the girl sitting next to Sasuke. Sakura Haruno. What in the world do I see in her anyway? She's loud, annoying, she hates me, and she's not even very attractive. Wait, where did that come from? Sakura's great, Why would I be thinking she was like that? If you ignore the annoying, whiny, fangirl bitchiness. Yeah, wait, what? Naruto decided to go back to reminiscing about his dreams and stop thinking about the object of his affection like that. Even though it's true, god damn it. The dream he had the night before last had been a bit more interesting and more peaceful. He had stood on a tall mountain, among so many others. They were massive, jutting upward through the clouds as if trying to pierce the heavens themselves. Deep valleys ran between them, and Naruto could just make out great stone bridges between the mountains connecting tunnels within them. The mountains were shades of dark gray and pure white, covered mostly in pristine white snow. The wind whipped around him, at such a speed that Naruto wondered why he hadn't been blown off, or even moved the slightest for that matter. He couldn't see much beyond the mountains, what could exist beyond the range, but it seemed to be rolling plains beyond them. And in the center of these great peaks, was the greatest of them all. This central mountain towered above the rest, at least twice as tall as any of the others. It was completely covered in pure white snow, and Naruto could only imagine how fast the wind blew up there. Standing atop the summit was a boy, just like his previous dreams. Like the others, he was about Naruto's age, and had the same whisker-like marks on his cheeks. Also like the others, this was where the similarities ended. His hair was pure white, just like the snow-capped peaks around him, and jutted out in large spikes. His eyes were an equally pure white and filled with joyous mirth, which was complemented by the large smile on his face. He was dressed in red, orange, brown, and yellow clothing. Tiny belts covered most of his shins and a few parts of his thighs. A leather belt, with 2 looping additions on the side, held his multicolored pants up. A high collar hid the lower half of his face, with the majority of his chest concealed by a thick leather belt while his arms were covered by a pair of long, elbow-length gloves. Hanging from the back of his waist was a pair of oddly shaped wakizashis. The boy seemed to sigh in a sort of exasperated manner. So, I wonder where you are. I hope you come out soon. That's when the fun's gonna start, he said in a cheerful voice that seemed to carry on the howling wind. The final dream, the one he had last night, had been different. For one thing, he hadn't been standing on the ground, or any surface for that matter. He had been simply floating in a great void, with many objects floating around him. What was really odd was that there was no real theme to the objects around him. They ranged from chairs to paintings to buildings to assorted fruits to a dead rabbit made of ships and corn. How that was possible, Naruto had no idea. That was in front of him. He also saw a few kujams, whatever those were. It was then that he saw his semi-lookalike in this dream. The boy had blonde hair like Naruto, but it was a fair brighter shade of yellow, and fell on the sides and back of his neck in odd braids. He was wearing a simple orange t-shirt and black pants. His eyes were a bright yellow filled with something. Naruto couldn't figure what. The boy sat on one of the kujams, and in his left hand was a leek. In his right was a chicken, held by the neck, and squawking madly. Suddenly, the boy ate the chicken, and the squawking was done with. "Where are you?" the boy said in a seemingly dark tone. "I have a chair rat for you," he said, changing immediately to a cheerful, sing-song tone, which made Naruto a little creeped out. The boy then yelled, "Return my lawnmower, heathen." Naruto had woken up that morning thinking, WTF? Naruto was broken from his thoughts as he heard his name called by Iruka-sensei. "Naruto Uzumaki." Iruka called from the front. Naruto smirked as he got to his feet and walked down the aisle. Now was the time to finally show everyone that he wasn't the dead last everyone thought he was. He stood at the front of the class before Iruka-sensei and Mizuki-sensei, ready to pass this damn test. "Alright Naruto, let's start with the basic henge," Mizuki began. "Transform into a perfect copy of Iruka." Naruto smiled as he made the ram hand sign and was obscured in a cloud of smoke. The smoke dissipated to reveal a perfect copy of Iruka. "Very good Naruto," Mizuki said. The Iruka in front of him went, poof, to reveal Naruto again. "Now Naruto, perform the kawarimi with that chair over there," Iruka said as he pointed to a chair and then threw a chalk eraser at Naruto. However, as it hit Naruto, he went, poof, to reveal the chair, which was where Naruto was now. "Good Naruto. Now all you have to do is make 2 perfect bunshin and you pass," Iruka said, smiling at the blonde. He was confident Naruto could pass this year. He had seen how much effort Naruto had put into making sure his bunshin were perfect, despite how much trouble he seemed to have with it. You can take your time with this one, Naruto. I know how much trouble you have with the bunshin jutsu, Iruka said to Naruto, knowing how much this meant to the boy. Nodding, Naruto adopted a face of concentration as he held the ram seal and began to gather his chakra for the jutsu. Come on. Gather the chakra, concentrate it. I have to get it this time. He knew he'd be able to make the bunshin right this time. He had done it like this dozens of times over the past week. He knew he'd get it right this time. He felt his chakra being pulled from his central coils. He felt it as he molded it to make the bunshin. He felt it rush through his chakra network as he began to release it. Where are you, destined child? The time is nearly upon us. Naruto's eyes widened as he saw a flash of silver light, and for one instant, saw a pair of mismatched eyes staring at him from a shrouded face. The left eye was a dark crimson, and had an odd symbol in it. The symbol was black and was made of 3 curved blades with a crimson dot in the center, from which curved red lines ran up each of the blades. From the back curved side of each of the blades, a smaller blade angled downward and connected with the blade behind it. From the juncture where each of the larger blades met the next one, emerged a smaller curved blade. The right eye was a dull gray, filled with concentric circles, one inside the other. Though it was more simplistic, it seemed to radiate just as much power as the left eye. Though the face that held the eyes was shrouded, Naruto could make out strands of silver and black hair falling in front of the eyes. Naruto didn't have any time to think about this as he released his gathered chakra into the jutsu. However, just as he did, he felt his chakra network flooded with something. He couldn't describe what it was. It didn't feel like his normal chakra. It really didn't feel like anything, or at least anything Naruto had felt before. But there was one thing Naruto could liken it to: power. It felt like pure power. Naruto could think of no other word to describe it. As it flooded his body, he felt like he could do anything. Like he was invincible. And it wasn't the amount of the chakra that mattered. In fact, it was only a small amount. His own chakra capacity was greater. No, this chakra seemed to radiate pure power. It felt more powerful than any chakra Naruto had felt before, even Old Man Hokage. Naruto was broken from his thoughts as he realized that this new chakra would mess up his jutsu. He desperately tried to call his chakra, and this new chakra, back. But it was too late, and his chakra, combined with whatever this other chakra was, erupted from Naruto's tenketsu. With spectacular results. Hinata Hyuga was sitting in her seat, almost at the back of the class, watching the blonde-haired boy she admired and loved. She was currently watching his testing, Byakugan activated. No, she was not using it for anything perverted, this time. She was actually watching Naruto's chakra system, to see if everything was alright when he didn't use the clone jutsu immediately. She saw him gathering chakra and it looked like he was about to release it into the jutsu. That was when Hinata noticed something odd. She noticed something strange about Naruto's chakra system. It was pulsing, almost violently, as if something was within it, trying to get out. Then, Naruto released his chakra to perform the jutsu. That was when all hell broke loose. Twin great flames of silver chakra appeared in Naruto's closed eyes. Then suddenly, an even greater silver flame appeared over the odd spiral pattern on his navel, and the silver chakra seemed to inundate Naruto's entire system as he released the jutsu. The silver chakra rushed through his tenketsu, and, through the chakra seeing sight of the Byakugan, Hinata saw Naruto light up like a supernova. Were it not for the fact that she shut off her Byakugan immediately, Hinata was sure any Hyuga, would have been blinded by that blast of chakra. The outpouring of Naruto's chakra didn't stop at just a light show for those that could see chakra. As she turned off her dojutsu, Hinata almost shivered as a literal wave of chakra washed over the entire room, dissipating on its walls and ceiling. Hinata could tell she was not the only one to feel the effects of this shockwave as several others in the class made it known. What the hell was that? One Kiba Inuzuka yelled out. Naruto-kun. Hinata thought Naruto's eyes widened as he felt the outburst of chakra blast out of his tenketsu. And just like that, all of the strange, powerful chakra he had felt was gone as well. Without any trace of its existence. Naruto, Iruka started in a sad and disappointed tone, "I'm sorry, but I don't think you can pass for that display." "What?" Naruto yelled, spinning around at his sensei in disbelief, only to realize he hadn't created any clones. He's right, Naruto, Mizuki said, you just expelled all of your chakra in one burst instead of molding it into the clones. That's hardly passable. But it wasn't. Naruto was about to, in a rare display of debating skill, explain that it had been a mere fluke with that weird chakra in his system, and he should be allowed a retake. But he was stopped as another rare flash of inspiration hit him. I shouldn't say anything. That would just raise questions, and perhaps it might prompt Mizuki to try something. That just might make things interesting. Naruto wasn't sure why he thought all those things, but he decided to go with it. It made sense for some odd reason. Never mind, Naruto said, responding to his outburst only a second before. You're right, I should have practiced more. Shaking his head, Iruka spoke again. Well, Naruto, I'm sorry, but you fail. Better luck next year, I guess. Naruto hung his head low as he walked back to his seat, ignoring the jeers and taunts made at him by his classmates over his failure. He never noticed the Hyuga girl silently crying in the back. Naruto sat on the railing outside of his apartment, his head hung low. He had been in this state ever since he failed the test. He had even turned down Iruka-sensei's offer for some free ramen at Ichiraku's. He had spent the rest of the day just wandering Konoha, ignoring the angry glares and avoidance he usually got. And now he just sat on the railing outside his apartment as the sun set, not sure of what to do anymore. He had failed the academy test, for the third time. Maybe he should just quit trying to be a shinobi altogether. It all seemed so hopeless. Hey Naruto. Naruto's head turned to the left as he saw his visitor landing on the railing next to him. Mizuki-sensei, Naruto said, not really caring at the moment. Listen, Naruto, Mizuki began, I think Iruka and I were a little hard on you today. I think you might have been able to pass. Doesn't matter anymore, Naruto drawled, I still failed. Not necessarily, I think, Mizuki said. There may still be a way you can pass. This had an immediate effect on Naruto as he almost fell off the railing as he spun around to look at the Chunin. What? You really mean it? Yep. Now here's what you have to do. In his training clearing, Naruto was sitting on one of the taller boulders as he gave his narrative, Kakashi leaning next to a large boulder next to his. That, Naruto said as he turning to Kakashi, a smirk on his face, was when things got interesting. Stealing the Forbidden Scroll had been easier than Naruto had expected. In fact, it had seemed too easy. Normally, Naruto would have been laughing at how easy it had been. However, this time it was different. He was thinking over what he had done. How long did he have to go over the scroll? How long would it take Sarutobi to wake up? How long until he realized the scroll was missing? How long until Anbu was scrambled? This was something that had Naruto confused greatly. Normally, he just acted impulsively, with no thought as to the consequences. But now, he was even wondering if he was doing the right thing. Why would stealing the Forbidden Scroll be a way to pass the Genin test? And what kind of teacher would expect an academy student to learn a jutsu from a scroll that was supposedly filled with high-level dangerous techniques? Wait, why am I thinking this? Mizuki-sensei said that if I did this, he'd pass me. But what if he's lying? Too much of this doesn't make sense. And I'm just an academy student. How could he expect me to learn a high-level jutsu? Naruto shook those thoughts from his head. If this kept up, he might go insane. But even still, part of him had been reluctant to steal the Forbidden Scroll. Another thing that confused him was another thought that had been going through his head. Sweet. I get to learn some jutsus from the Forbidden Scroll. Man, I wonder how many academy students get to do this. It wasn't so much of those thoughts, as Naruto had understood that completely, it was what he had also thought of it. This should give me quite an edge once I become a genin. Having a high-level jutsu would make one hell of an ace. Now Naruto could understand that, he just didn't normally think like that. As he reached the shack where he was supposed to meet Mizuki-sensei, Naruto took the scroll off his back and unrolled it. Sitting down against a tree, Naruto looked at the first jutsu he saw on the scroll. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Aw man. More clones. He yelled out in exasperation. He couldn't even do the normal Bunshin jutsu. How could he do something that was even harder? But then if I can get this jutsu down, then shouldn't everything else be easy? I mean, this is probably the hardest one in the scroll for me. Naruto's eyes perked up at this thought. Yeah, if he could do this one, he could do anything. Filled with new determination, the blonde glanced over the jutsu description before coming to the seals. Thankfully, only one hand seal was required for the jutsu, though Naruto noticed it also required a very large amount of chakra. Nodding to himself, Naruto set the scroll down as he stood and made the cross-shaped hand seal for the technique. As he did this, he began molding his chakra like he had done for the normal bunshin, but he realized he would need a lot more to meet the requirements. Not being one for modesty, Naruto drew on as much chakra as he could, something he'd never really done before. If he hadn't been so focused on the jutsu, Naruto would have noticed something seriously wrong. He was beginning to emit an aura of sky blue chakra, something not even some Junin could do. Naruto knew his chakra control was no good, so in another rare flash of inspiration, he seemed to having these a lot lately, he realized that he'd have to compensate by using as much chakra as he could. When he was channeling as much as he possibly could, he released his molded chakra in a blast as he called out the jutsu's name. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. It was then, right then and there, that Naruto, the class clown of the academy, the prankster of Konoha and the dead last of the ninja academy, died. Naruto gripped his head as voices yelled about him, calling him. "Please tell me, where are you?" came a soft, calm voice. A voice that ran through his head like running water. "Where are you, whelp? Where are you?" came a louder, more forceful voice. A voice that seemed to burn Naruto's very ears, yet it was not painful. "So, where are you? Can you see me? Where do you gaze from?" came a monotonous, even voice. A voice that held incredible strength, and shook Naruto's head like an earthquake. "So, I wonder where you are. I hope you come out soon. That's when the fun's going to start," came a cheerful, mirth-filled voice. A voice that came through Naruto's ears like a gust of calm wind. "Where are you? I have a chair rat for you," came an odd sing-song voice. A voice that jolted Naruto like he had just been shocked with electricity. Naruto clutched his head as the voices called to him again and again, trying to find his answer. A great pain assaulted him, his head seemed like it was ready to burst. All of this seemed so alien, so different. "Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Where are you, destined child?" The voices, Naruto knew them, they were so much like him. No, they were him. This was him. The pain vanished, and Naruto's hands dropped to his side. New emotions, new feelings, new thoughts, things he wouldn't have been able to comprehend 5 minutes ago resonated through his mind. His face set in a determined glare, Naruto called out the voices, to himself. "I'm right here." The voices stopped, and Naruto opened his eyes to find he was still in the clearing, and that no time had passed. Raising his hand in front of his face, Naruto stared at his palm, as if trying to read some language that only he could understand. He had stared at it for only a few seconds before he clenched his hand into a fist, a smirk on his face that most would find completely alien on him. "Orders, sir." Naruto looked past his clenched hand to find 5 clones kneeling in front of him, their heads bowed. The fact that he was just successful in what should have been his most difficult technique seemed irrelevant to the blonde as he addressed the chakra constructs. "Sir, you're not acting how I would have expected." The center clone raised his head and spoke. "You are the original. It should only be natural that we follow your orders. And what better organizational structure is there than a military order?" True enough. The original spoke. That did make sense, and these were his clones. It should only be natural that they think the same way as him. "All right, one of you, take up position in the trees and watch for anyone coming. The rest of you, help me look over this scroll." He wanted someone watching for anyone coming. Before he was unsure of Mizuki's intent, but now he had an idea. He didn't know why Mizuki wanted him to steal the forbidden scroll, but he was assuming it was something bad. Sarutobi hadn't known anything about it, that alone warranted doubt. So right now Naruto was assuming the worst-case scenario. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. He knew that Sarutobi would probably be awake by now and would have scrambled a pursuit team. If his hunch was right, and Mizuki did want the scroll for himself, that's when he would make his move. Most likely he was counting on Naruto's ignorance, stupidity and naivete. But now, Naruto was anything but those. If Mizuki did make a move, Naruto would be ready for him. "Yes, sir." The clone to the far right ran to one of the trees pointing towards where Naruto had came from and quickly scaled it to one of the lower branches where he'd have a good view of anything coming. The other four moved with the original to the scroll and began looking over it. Smirks spread over all of their faces as they began reading. The old Naruto might not have been able to understand the true significance of what he held, but in his new, enlightened state, he understood completely. He was currently holding one of the greatest jutsu archives in the world, and he intended to make as much use of it as time allowed. Mizuki, you poor fool. Let us see who is the tool now, shall we? It was about 15 minutes later that the four clones and the original heard their counterpart yell. Hey guys, I think WHAA. The five blondes looked to the tree only to see the sixth fall to the ground. As the clone hit the ground, he disappeared in a poof of smoke, signifying that he had been dispelled. Hey, I think, whoa. Did the rest of you feel that? Naruto said to his clones, eyes widened in realization. The clones nodded, their faces in similar states of shock. The minute the clone that fell had been dispelled, they had all been implanted with a range of knowledge. The clone's knowledge. The implications of this already dawning of all of them. Naruto turned to one of the other clones. The clone nodded, understanding of what the original wanted already in its mind, and forced itself to dispel. The remaining Narutos flinched slightly as new knowledge of what the Forbidden Scroll contained flooded into their minds. So whatever one of us learns during our lifetime, one of the clones began. The rest of us learn when we get dispelled, another finished. The original's lips curled into a wicked smirk as realization dawned on them, as well as the uses of this. The potential of Kage Bunshin had just gone up 100-fold. His eyes widened as he remembered that the clone in the tree had seen someone coming. That was why he had been calling to the rest of them. And with the amount of time they'd spent discovering this newly found feature of Kage Bunshin, the newcomer would be on top of them any second now. Naruto acted quickly and spoke in a low voice as he rolled up the scroll. The rest of you, dispel now. The clones nodded as they vanished in a poof of smoke. Naruto flinched slightly as the memories of all they learned from the scroll were assimilated by his mind. He had learned a few useful jutsu, but he'd probably need to practice them before he could use them effectively, something Kage Bunshin would make far easier. But right now he had more important things to worry about. Strapping the scroll to his back again, Naruto sat against one of the trees, feigning exhaustion. If it was Mizuki, he'd have to pretend to still be a naive idiot. At least long enough to figure out his intentions. If they were bad, well, with Kage Bunshin and the element of surprise, Naruto was confident he could take the Chunin. Needless to say, Naruto was a bit surprised when Iruka Amino leapt out of the trees and landed in front of him, with a look that said, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Oh well, he'd put up the act anyway and see where things went from there. At the very least, he could now confirm Mizuki's intentions to a degree. Hey, so you found me, Iruka-sensei, Naruto said, scratching the back of his head and adopting the grin most people knew him for. In retrospect, Naruto didn't really like that grin anymore, but he did have an act to keep up. Apparently, Iruka wasn't in his normal, joking mood. Naruto. What the hell do you think you're doing stealing the Forbidden Scroll? Have you lost your mind? This only reinforced Naruto's suspicions of Mizuki, so he decided to push a bit further. Well, Mizuki-sensei told me that if I could get the Forbidden Scroll and learn a jutsu from it, then I could pass, Naruto said, mimicking his old loud and obnoxious voice well, even though he was now beginning to hate his old self. Mizuki, but why would he? Iruka now seemed extremely confused with the situation. Naruto, on the other hand, almost couldn't contain the dark smirk threatening to grace his lips. That was all the confirmation he needed. Iruka's stumbling over his words was cut off as they both heard the sound of a group of shuriken coming at them. Now, Naruto had heard this too, and was fully capable of leaping out of the way. However, this was with his new mindset, and the fact he was entirely expecting this. As far as Iruka knew, however, Naruto was still a kind-hearted, if naive, boy who would hardly know what to do. So he did the only thing he could think to do to save Naruto. Naruto. Watch out! Naruto was already beginning to leap out of the weapon's path when Iruka violently pushed him. Wondering what the hell was wrong with his teacher, Naruto looked back, only to find the man pinned to the old shack by 6 shuriken. Some were pinning him and others merely sticking into his chest and arms. A slight rustle caught Naruto's attention, and he whipped his head around to find Mizuki crouched on a tree on the other end of the clearing. Mizuki smirked, the supersized shuriken clanging lightly as he let out a low, short chuckle. Though neither of the Chunin could see it, Naruto was growling venomously. He knew Mizuki would try something like this, but he didn't want anyone getting hurt in the process, and the fact that even if he was mentally prepared for such an eventuality, the actual sense of betrayal still stung. Mizuki's evil smile stretched a bit. Great job finding him. Now, I understand. Iruka spat venomously, tugging a shuriken from his shoulder. Mizuki's smirk dropped, and he spoke seriously. Naruto, give me the scroll. No way in hell, you double-crossing bastard. No matter what, Naruto, Iruka said, pulling another weapon loose. Don't give him the scroll. Mizuki used you to get his slimy hands on it. Though neither of the men could tell, Naruto had absolutely no intention of letting that happen. Mizuki smirked evilly, speaking in a sing-song voice. Naruto, there's no point in you having it. Let me tell you the truth. Iruka's heart stopped for a second. No, don't, Mizuki. Naruto ignored the pinned Chunin and looked to the one in the tree. Oh, what secret? He was curious what Mizuki was going to try on him. It was true that he could just be stalling, but with the possibility of Enbu showing up any minute, he doubted that, and his curiosity got the better of him. Mizuki's evil grin widened. Now he could completely crush this brat in front of him. He could tell him how much of a demon he was. What he had done to the village he supposedly loved. 12 years ago, the demon fox Kyuubi was destroyed. And ever since that event, a new rule was created, a rule that everyone knows but you, because, Naruto, you were never meant to know it. Oh? Naruto asked, eyes icy blue. What rule? That no one is allowed to speak of the fact. Mizuki's eyes widened excitedly. That Kyuubi isn't dead. The demon fox couldn't be killed, and so it was sealed away, in a newborn baby. Naruto's eyes widened as his mind began piecing together this new information, and only one possibility became apparent. Seeing Naruto's surprise, Mizuki dealt what he thought would be the final blow to the boy. Yes. The Kyuubi lives on inside you. You are the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Naruto's mouth hung slightly open, as if he was trying to process this new revelation. Iruka hung his head in shame and sadness, now that Naruto knew that terrible secret. Mizuki decided to push things further, to rub salt in the wound he thought. You know? Everyone knew except those born after the attack. And they all hate you, everyone, even Iruka there. They despise you. He cackled, pointing at the pinned Chunin. Cool. Mizuki's and Iruka's brains promptly stopped at that statement. What? Was all Mizuki could stammer, while staring at the blonde who was now wearing a small smile of pride. The most powerful demon in the world. Inside me. That's pretty cool, and that explains how I heal so fast. Sure, it's made everyone hate me, but I don't really give a shit about them anymore. And I'll take uber demon powers over the respect of the masses any day of the week. Mizuki was now desperately trying to put things together. He had thought this whole encounter out completely. The demon brat was supposed to take the truth with shock and terror. Not this. Oh. I get it. You thought this out so much in your head that you can't comprehend the fact that I'm not curling up in a little ball and weeping like a little emo right now, am I right? Naruto said, adopting an innocent and knowing smile. From his spot on the shack, Iruka was now beginning to wonder if this was the real Naruto in front of him. He wasn't acting like he normally did at all. Mizuki had now regained some of his mental processes and put together what he thought was the perfect explanation. Oh, now I see. The seal has broken. You are Kyuubi? Naruto's expression went from knowing to confused. Wait a minute. Weren't you calling me Kyuubi when you thought I was still a naive idiot? And now because I'm not, you think that Kyuubi has taken over, but didn't you think I was Kyuubi before? Yeah? What's your point, demon? Naruto's expression was quickly turning into one of shock and confusion. And the entire village thinks the same way? Yeah. Mizuki yelled, not sure what the demon was trying. Naruto's mouth now hung open in a look of shock, confusion and a little disgust. Oh my god. I live in a village of mental retards. Huh. So you are the demon. You're plotting our demise right now. But now I'll end Reign of Terror, and get that scroll. No one will be able to stop me. Naruto's face shifted into one of aloof interest. Oh. And how are you going to do that? Aren't I the all-powerful demon lord Kyuubi? and aren't you some lowly chunin? How could you hope to defeat me if what you say is true? This stopped Mizuki's mad laugh, causing him to stutter for a second, before settling on one of his twisted lines of logic. Your tricks won't work on me, demon. You can't fool me, he yelled as he pulled one of the Fuma shurikens from his back and hurled it at Naruto. However, Naruto saw this coming and easily sidestepped it while making a now familiar seal. No, you seem to be fooling yourself enough, he spoke as 4 clones poofed into appearance. Iruka was gasping at this. Naruto had not only just done a technique that he had almost never been able to do before, he had done a far more advanced variation of it. Mizuki, though, was laughing madly. You think that'll make a difference? It doesn't matter if there's 1 or 5 of you. You're not even a genin. Well, did you know that 85% of all surprise attacks come from behind? Naruto said, his face turning into a dark knowing smirk. Mizuki processed this information just in time to feel the rushing of air behind him. He leapt into the air to dodge a pair of flying kick from 2 clones. What? Mizuki yelled in alarm. The demon wasn't supposed to be this smart. He was unable to think any further as he noticed the 2 clones in the tree as well as the 4 others, and the original had thrown a hail of kunai at him, 4 each it seemed, each group of 4 from a different angle. Luckily for him, the demon wasn't as good at throwing kunai as other things. Quickly twisting his body, Mizuki was able to dodge most of the barrage, only taking small scratches and cuts. You'll have to do better than that, demon. How's this then? Naruto retorted. Mizuki's eyes widened as each and every one of the kunais was enveloped in smoke to reveal more Narutos, each holding a quartet of shuriken or kunai. The clones smirked as they let loose their barrage of steel. Back on the ground, Iruka was filled with shock and awe. Naruto shouldn't have been able to come up with a strategy this complex. This was a maneuver worthy of Shikamaru. Mizuki desperately tried to dodge the assault, but there were just too many, and they seemed to be better aimed this time. Iruka turned his head away as Mizuki was turned into a veritable pincushion. Naruto, on the other hand, looked on with a look of indifference. His raised an eyebrow in mild surprise as he saw Mizuki's broken and bloodied body poof into a log. Iruka was far more shocked and surprised, and he began glancing around, trying to find out where Mizuki was. His eyes widened in fear as he noticed the air begin to shimmer right behind Naruto, who was holding a kunai in his left hand, the telltale sign of a shunshin. Naruto, behind you. There was a flash and poof of smoke which obscured the Chunin's vision. He desperately tried to free himself, fearing the worst. However, as the smoke cleared, his eyes widened further in shock and a little fear. The kunai in Naruto's left hand had been replaced with a long nodashi, which was skewering Mizuki through the chest. Mizuki's face was one of pure shock, while Naruto's was one of amusement. As I said, 85% of all surprise attacks come from behind, he said as his right hand reached over to the handle. He then quickly spun around, pulling the sword from Mizuki's chest and cleanly beheaded the Chunin. So, what do you think? Yes, I killed Mizuki off again like in NNK, but I think I had Naruto do it in a far more badass way. That, and who likes that guy anyway? If you're confused with how Naruto got the nodashi he killed Mizuki with, no, it's not some mysterious power he randomly manifested. The kunai in his hand was just a hanged cage bunshin. When Naruto felt Mizuki shunshin behind him, he had the clone change into a sword, which instantly impaled Mizuki. And this pretty much explains just what kind of shinobi Naruto is going to be in this FIC. He is going to be powerful but not uber powerful. Most of his battles are going to be against people more powerful, sometimes far more, than himself, Zabuza, Kakashi, or Orochimaru. So he's mainly going to rely on strategy and cunning. Also, no Kyuubi supercharging Naruto for no apparent reason, yet. Not for a while at least. Kyuubi's power will play a role, but most of Naruto's abilities and powers will be of his own creation, using Kyuubi as a sort of power source for it all. That doesn't mean Naruto won't be using the normal demon form or conversing with Kyuubi. That will happen pretty soon. Oh, and this is going to be a Naruhina FIC if you haven't figured that out yet. As for Naruto's drastic personality change, well, that won't be fully explained for a while, major plot element. At this point, even outside the flashback, Naruto doesn't fully know how it happened, but it's a positive change, so he's not complaining. And he's not one to look a gift horse in the mouth. After that, I told the old man the same story when he and the Anbu found us a few minutes later. You know the rest, Naruto said as he finished his narrative, still sitting atop the boulder. Kakashi let out a low whistle. That was quite the story, but it had also raised a few questions of its own. So what exactly were those voices then? Naruto adopted a thoughtful expression as he looked up at the sun, which was beginning to fall towards the horizon. To put it bluntly, they're other personas within me. Huh? Was all Kakashi could reply to that. Well, how should I put this? You know what it's like when someone's bipolar, right? When someone has two different personalities? Yeah, well, I suppose you could call me hexapolar. What, does that mean you have like 5 other personalities? Kakashi asked. So the kid was not only creating new shinobi techniques, he was making his own mental disorders? Pretty much. Don't worry, unlike other people with multiple personalities, I actually have control over these other personalities, usually. And they're not really other personalities, they're more like the embodiments of my base emotions. Okay. What are they then? Kakashi wasn't exactly following Naruto on this, but he decided he'd just take his student's word for it. After all, Naruto seemed to be sane enough, as much as one could be in the shinobi world anyway. Well, there are 6 that I know of so far. Holding up one finger for emphasis, Naruto continued. The first one, Antheros, embodies all of my rage, anger, bloodlust, stuff like that. He's basically a sociopathic pyromaniac who spends his time plotting world domination and telling me to go kill and or blow up random stuff and or people. So he's where the burn Konoha to the soil thing came from. Naruto continued in a bored tone like it was nothing unordinary, and to him it probably wasn't. The second one I've dubbed Varsi. He makes up kindness, compassion, love, yada yada yada. But he also embodies sadness and indecision, so as you can imagine I've had him suppressed for a while. Kakashi nodded. From what he had heard, Naruto's life was pretty hard before this. So it shouldn't be much of a surprise that he would have suppressed any feelings of fear or sadness. Next one I've got is Zex. He's pretty much the tactician of our little group. He's calm, cool, level-headed. Stuff like that. Always wanting to think things out before acting. But he also represents any feelings of rest, being laid back, mellow, you know. Basically he's a lazy bastard with an IQ of about 250. He's one of those I listen to more than others. Kakashi chuckled a little at that. Figures that had been the main reason Naruto wasn't a hyperactive idiot anymore. After that is probably the last remaining fragment of my former self, Xenos. He's not exactly hyperactive, but he is free-spirited, a bit hyper, fun-loving, basically the prankster of the group. He loves annoying Antheros, at least until the pyro tries to barbecue him again. A small sweat drop appeared on Kakashi's head as he tried to visualize Naruto's personalities interacting with each other. Lastly as well, the crazy one, Naruto said as he seemed to be becoming exasperated or something like that. His name is Drak and he is, well, completely nuts. If he does embody anything, it's complete randomness and insanity. So yes, he's the reason we were throwing random crap at you and the Trojan bunny thing. He is rather funny though, and it is kind of fun to go nuts for a little while sometimes. So does that answer your question? Pretty much, Kakashi said, nodding. But do you have any idea what exactly happened that night to cause this? After all, Naruto still hadn't mentioned that particular detail. I don't know, Naruto said, shrugging. I've certainly come up with a few ideas, but nothing really concrete. But I'm not one to look a gift horse in the mouth, so I've just decided to go with it. Make the best out of what life throws at you, you know. Kakashi could only nod in agreement. Kakashi was now staring up at his new student, as if trying to read something in him. Never before had he had a student like this. Hell, he'd never met a shinobi that even came close to resembling the blonde. But that was probably a good thing. Over the past few hours, Kakashi had gotten exactly what he had come here for. An evaluation of his student's skill level and more importantly, how his mind worked. And from what the blonde had told him, Kakashi in all honesty liked what he saw. He could see that not only did Naruto have nigh limitless potential as a shinobi, but he also had the mindset to go with it. He held human life in regard, but wasn't afraid to kill. He had his morals, but could quickly bury them for the good of the mission. In the end, Naruto had the mindset that most shinobi don't get until they hit Junin. All in all, Naruto would fit into the shinobi world perfectly. Well, thanks for your time, Kakashi said as he stepped away from the rock he had been leaning against. But I need to get going. I'd say I'm way overdue for the genin evaluation for Hokage-sama. Really? 'Cause from what I can tell, you'd be heading there right about now even if you hadn't come here, Naruto said with a teasing grin. Kakashi chuckled. Yeah, I suppose you got me on that one. That kid was more perceptive than he thought. Anyway, since you left before I could tell you, we're meeting at Training Ground 7 tomorrow at 8 a.m. Does that include the 3-hour delay you're going to give us? I'm hurt, Kakashi said in a faux sad tone. Do you really have that low of an opinion of your sensei? Naruto gazed upward in a thoughtful expression as if he were pondering that question before reverting back to his grin. Yeah, pretty much. Kakashi chuckled again. He was going to enjoy working with this kid. Well then, I'd say you're smart enough to figure that out for yourself, he replied as he turned around and began to walk out of the clearing. Naruto himself jumped down from the boulder and started walking towards the waterfall to join his clones. Hey Naruto. The blonde turned back to his sensei just in time to catch 2 small scrolls that had been tossed to him. Raising an eyebrow in curiosity, he looked to his sensei for elaboration. Since you already know Kage Bunshin, I thought those 2 would come in handy for you, and I'm pretty sure you didn't find them in the Forbidden Scroll. Looking closely at the labels, a pseudo-evil smirk spread across Naruto's face. Yes, I think they will. Thanks sensei, he replied, looking back to the silver-haired Junin. Simply nodding, Kakashi made a ram seal before poofing away. He'll go far. I know it, Kakashi thought to himself as he reappeared outside the Hokage Tower. But I wonder, what will he do about that other eavesdropper? Bunshin Daibakuha and Shuriken Kage Bunshin Naruto thought to himself as he passed the scrolls off to a Django and a Cadmus team leaders respectively. Those'll come in handy. But it was also time to deal with the other eavesdropper. He wasn't exactly sure why he had his picket lines let her through, but he supposed it was because he just wanted someone to talk to in his age group that didn't hate him. You can come out now, Hinata. Hinata Hyuga had been sitting up in a tree on the edge of the clearing for some time now. After finishing Kurenai Sensei's test, she had immediately sought out Naruto. She had to know what had happened to him. Even though their senseis hadn't noticed it, almost everyone in their class was wondering what had happened to the blonde ever since his display the day before at the team assignments. Flashback. 20 hours earlier. Hinata sat in her usual seat at the back of the class, head held low. Her pale white eyes were dark and half-lidded. Small, nigh invisible lines ran down her face from her eyes, proof to any that looked close enough that she had been crying recently, not that anyone ever did take a moment to do that. She was still coming to grips with one undeniable fact. She was never going to see him again. Naruto had failed that day. He wouldn't become genin like the rest of them. He'd have to take the class again, and she'd never see him again. That night a week before, she had cried herself to sleep, and the night after, and the night after that. She had ignored the normal harsh words of her father Hiyashi, who had berated her for not finishing at the top of her class, that a Hyuga should not show emotion so flippantly as he had called it. She had almost lost her self-control at that remark. How dare he call her show of emotion flippant when she was weeping over the fact that the boy she loved might never realize his lifelong dream. She had come to grips with it far better now that she had time to think about it, but she could do no more than accept the grim reality of the fact. Occasionally, her eyes would dart upwards whenever she heard the door to the classroom open. A testament to her hope, even though she knew it was hopeless, that she might see the boy who meant everything to her walk through. He was her inspiration, her goal, the very light of her world. An ironic statement to make considering the meaning her name. As she heard the door open again, she almost looked up, but decided against it, knowing in her heart that it wouldn't, and never would be, Naruto-kun. But she was surprised when she heard one of her classmates, one Kiba Inuzuka, speak up. Hey, what's he doing here? Dead lasts don't belong here. Curious, and even slightly hopeful, Hinata raised her head to look at whoever had just walked in. Even though she knew that fate itself seemed to have conspired against her. But the next words she heard shattered such a prospect. Well, if that's how you think, then I suppose you should get out of here then, ya hypocrite. Hinata looked over to Kiba, whose eyes were wide and mouth hanging wide open. Turning her head to the front of the class, Hinata's eyes widened further in a combination of shock, happiness and incomprehension. There, standing at the front of the class, an uncharacteristic smirk adorning his face, was Naruto. But it was not the Naruto she knew, and if she wasn't so shocked, she might be thinking that it was a better Naruto. The hideous orange jumpsuit was gone, and in its place was a simple black t-shirt and plain black pants with his headband tied around his neck. His pose was also far different. Instead of a rigid, coiled spring-like pose like he normally had, he was partially hunched over with his hands in his pockets. More like Shikamaru if she had to describe it. His tone and speech were far different. Normally, he would respond to Kiba's taunts with a brash or boastful counter that would in all seriousness make him look like a loud annoying idiot. This time, he had simply turned the taunt right back on the dog boy, and had spoken in a calm, slightly annoyed tone. But by far the biggest change of all were his eyes. Physically, his eyes were the same as ever. It was what Hinata saw in the boy's eyes that made her shiver. Whether in fear or excitement she couldn't tell. Before, his eyes had held a blind happiness, a great light that shined outward. They had been like twin gleaming stars, blazing light out to all around them. Now, they were different. Naruto's eyes were dark, but not guarded like one would expect. They held a dark look of confidence and superiority. At the same time tempting, as if challenging all who looked upon them to prove themselves. Instead of twin gleaming stars, they were like twin orbs of blue fire, their great heat thrusting outwards and threatening to consume all. As Hinata gazed into them, even from afar, she feared she might lose herself in those azure flames, but at the same time, she would like nothing more than that. But then, as Naruto's smirk disappeared, and he settled back into that lazy posture, Hinata saw his eyes change again. This time, they held a look of not confidence, but of indifference and uncaring. Not only that, but they held a look of wisdom and observation, as if he was an invisible specter observing the goings-on of the world from afar. Instead of the blue flames from before, Naruto's eyes were like twin azure crystals. And in whose reflection, everything you were was shown to you, good and bad. And what Hinata saw, was herself, her wrongs, her rights, everything. It was as if he had learned everything about her just by meeting her gaze. Hinata's drastic observations were stopped as her Naruto's eyes left her gaze, and the spell they cast on her was broken. Again, she shivered, but this time, she knew exactly what it was. It was because it was gone. Naruto lazily walked up one of the aisles, ignoring the glances that ranged from curious to WTF. Finding a seat near the top, he sat down, leaning back in the chair, hand behind his head and eyes closed. A voice from his left drew his attention, but not enough for him to openly acknowledge it. "You know, you never did answer his question," said Shikamaru Nara, himself in a similarly reclined position, seemingly unfazed by the complete 180 Naruto's personality had taken. Opening one of his eyes and fixing Shikamaru with a critical gaze, Naruto replied in something no one would have expected. "Melon." Now almost everyone who heard it was thinking if Naruto had somehow lost his grip on sanity. But it was what happened next that really messed with everyone's head. "No number melon," Shikamaru replied, returning the critical gaze. Naruto's gaze shifted to the ceiling as he seemed to be contemplating something before looking back to the Nara. "Desk then?" "No," was Shikamaru's reply. "Fig?" "No." "Crumpets?" "Are you nuts?" "Good point." As Naruto continued to suggest random objects to Shikamaru for no apparent reason, only to have them shot down for an even less apparent reason, most everyone in the classroom was wondering much the same thing. WTFH? How about tree? Shikamaru tapped his chin as he thought about it. "What kind of tree?" he replied. "Spruce." "Yes then, you can have tree." "Yay," Naruto said in a semi-high-pitched tone, yet still retaining the same volume level while holding his right-hand fingers in the victory sign. He then seemed to instantly revert to his lazy and indifferent state. Silence reigned as people tried to process what the hell just happened. That silence was broken as Naruto spoke up. "What about shoe?" "No number shoe for you, damn it." While everyone was pondering what had made the two boys lose their grip on sanity and what they might do next. Something most everyone was now fearing. At the back of the class, one Shino Aburame was thinking something a bit different. "Spruce? I would have preferred pine." LALALALALALALAI like pancakes LALALALALALALA. Note to self. Stop eating the paint chips, and increase medication. Silence reigned in the classroom as the majority of its occupants tried to process what had just occurred, and whether or not it was really Naruto in that seat. It was just incomprehensible. There was no term to describe what had just happened, other than pure, unadulterated insanity maybe. Thankfully for everyone, a sense of normalcy returned as the two most enthusiastic members of Sasuke's fan club burst through the door. Ha! Take that Ino pig. I got here first, Fat Chance, Forehead Chan. My foot was obviously ahead of yours. I get to sit with Sasuke-kun. Like hell, pig, I'm going to sit with Sasuke-kun. Neither of you will, I am going to sit with Sasuke-kun. This quickly ignited the usual scramble by most females in the room to the coveted seat next to Sasuke. Though through all of the chaotic screaming and the sound of feet running up, down wooden stairs, few noticed a quiet and subdued conversation taking place. Though the whole reason for it being subdued was the fact that its participants preferred to speak softly. They had sensitive ears. You know, have you ever noticed that not one of them seems to ever realize that there are two seats next to Sasuke? Spoke Naruto, having closed his eyes in a now vain attempt to sleep. Yeah. It never ceases to amaze me how they hope to become shinobi with that amount of common sense. Shikamaru replied in a similar position. Indeed. But if you think about it, it's only fitting. If they did have the common sense to realize that, they probably would devised a far more effective strategy of winning his favor. Or have actually realized the futility of pursuing him in the first place. But then again, I suppose that is the fate of those of lesser mind. Shikamaru cocked his head in mild curiosity. Since when did you become so philosophical? Since last week. And I'm a bit more surprised that you're not surprised that I'm no longer among the more annoying group of our peers, Naruto replied. Meh. So your personality did a 180. Stranger things have happened. And you're not an annoying idiot anymore, and I finally have someone to have an intellectual discussion with. No offense, Choji. The young Nara answered while glancing over to the chub. Evil Choji glare. I mean, big-boned boy to his right. None taken, was Choji's answer, having decided to follow Shikamaru's example concerning Naruto's apparent change and just go with it. And concerning your last statement, I don't believe that they actually qualify as our peers. Remember, the dictionary defines peer as someone of equal standing to yourself whom you do not know well or are not acquainted with. I highly doubt that those fighting over the seat next to Sasuke could come even close to filling the former of those requirements. True enough. Naruto agreed with a nod. Though it truly is a pity that those such as them even graduated the academy. I wouldn't rate their life expectancy very high once they become genin. Agreed. In a way, it's actually too bad we're not in a war. If we were, then they would have been dropped from the program long ago, was Shikamaru's reply. Yep. They give kunoichi in general a bad name. Hell, they give ninja in general a bad name. Indeed, came the stoic agreement of Shino from the row behind them. How long have you been sitting there? Shikamaru asked, turning his head slightly. Turning to the Nara, Shino replied, since the beginning of time. Shikamaru seemed to be pondering that, while at the same time trying to come up with some reply before quickly retorting. Well, your mom. Shino raised an eyebrow before retaliating. Your face. Your foot. Came Naruto's skillfully timed and choreographed surprise attack. Meanwhile, on the other side of Shikamaru, Choji decided to save what was left of his sanity by fleeing to his happy place. It was this scene that Iruka walked in on 30 minutes later. The Sasuke fangirls continued their never-ending struggle for the coveted seat next to Sasuke-kun, never noticing the seat on the other side of him. And while random expendable characters continued to have meaningless and insignificant conversations, Naruto seemed to be embroiled in an intellectual conversation with Shikamaru and Bugman Shino. With those three, you know, it could be carried by an African swallow, Shikamaru said. Well yes, an African swallow maybe, but not a European swallow, that's my point, was Naruto's reply. But then again, African swallows are non-migratory, Shikamaru brought up. Yes, true, wait a minute, what if two swallows carried it? Shino spoke up. Oh now that's just silly. Meanwhile, on the other side of Shikamaru, Find my happy place. Find my happy place. Find my happy place. Find my happy place. Where are you, happy place? Perhaps it was better that they were too far away for many people to hear. Iruka was about to get everyone's attention with his signature, big-headed teacher, jutsu, when Naruto accomplished that task for him. You know what? Screw all this, Naruto said as he stood up, apparently having come to an impasse with his conversation with Shino and Shikamaru. Let's just find some coconuts and some swallows and just make a big pie out of them. Happy, he seemed to say to Shikamaru and Shino, who seemed to be considering this as if it were an actual intelligent discussion and not something completely retarded, though Iruka might be thinking differently if he had actually heard their conversation, though that in itself is arguable. Then Naruto noticed that everyone was looking at him like he had just proclaimed himself to be the son of the Yondaime, container of Kyuubi no Kitsune, and reincarnation of the Rokudo Sennin. Again, his eyes darting around, Naruto quickly pointed to the front of the room. Look, a distraction. Oh, hi Iruka-sensei, he said as he noticed the Chunin and waved as if nothing was wrong and sat back down next to Shikamaru, who looked in a similar state, while Choji looked to be in the midst of a seizure. Okay then, Iruka started, decided to simply not ask. Now, if you're here, that means that you've passed the Genin exam. Congratulations. You've just begun your foray into the world of being a shinobi, and things are only going to get harder from here. Naruto tuned Iruka out for a few minutes, just barely hearing him give some sort of speech on responsibilities and hardships that they would now be enduring for the good of Konoha, or some such thing. Naruto smirked to himself for a moment. The thought of him doing something for the good of Konoha was almost laughable at this point. He allowed himself to drift off slightly, but he immediately perked up at the mention of team assignments. They went through a few teams, skipping over a few numbers, because those teams already existed, until Naruto heard his name called. Team 7. Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Haruno. At this, everyone in the room expected Naruto jump for joy, and Sakura to groan in disappointment. However, everyone was shocked. Though in retrospect, many should have seen this coming, all thing considered. Even Iruka, at hearing Naruto's reaction. Crap, at least Sakura's groan of annoyance was a welcome norm. And Sasuke Uchiha. A sense of normalcy reigned in the room once again, at seeing Sakura squeal in delight, and Naruto cursing even louder. Naruto may have thought Sasuke was an okay person, but it didn't change the fact that he was a stuck-up, arrogant, emo bastard. Being forced to be on the same team as him was going to be troublesome, to quote Shikamaru. Really, really troublesome. Soon, the rest of the teams were called, and the Junin senseis began to file in to collect their new charges. When Team 10 was called by their sensei, Asuma, Shikamaru gave Naruto a pat on the shoulder as he got up. Good luck. Thanks. Hopefully I'll stay sane long enough to get them killed. Then at least I can regress. The young Nara chuckled at his friend's grave misfortune as he left. End flashback. Ever since then, Hinata had not been able to shake that feeling. That feeling of loss. That feeling had since given way to a new one. A desire. A desire that had burned away her shyness. That day, she knew Naruto had changed, like everyone else did, but only she knew just how much. When she had stared into his eyes, the shiver that she felt, the tempting lure it had given off. But not only that. The way his eyes looked after that, how they seemed like perfect crystals. Hinata now knew, there was more to Naruto than anyone could ever have imagined. And she wanted to know. That desire. The desire to know the true Naruto. Who he really was. Just who was it behind those azure eyes that could change almost fundamentally in an instant? Hinata could tell by looking, that his personality hadn't just changed before he came to the team assignments. It had changed fundamentally even after he entered the classroom. The way his eyes had changed, from a raging fire to a solid crystal. And sometimes, when he had been talking to Shikamaru and Shino, she had seen his eyes change again. Instead of a heated flame or gleaming crystal, they were like sparks of blue lightning leaping across his eyes, random, uncontrollable. Normally, Hinata would have attributed such things to complete insanity. But there was something different about this. Naruto's outward personality had hardly changed a bit. Sure, he had acted a bit odd and random, but it was controlled. And then there was what Hinata saw behind those eyes. It is said that the eyes are a window to person's soul, and the Hyugas had long since perfected the art of reading people through those windows to the soul. And Hinata had gotten very adept in reading Naruto, all those times she had looked into his eyes from afar. Before, Naruto's soul had been just like any other. But now, it was like nothing Hinata had ever seen before, or even imagined. In the split second when Naruto's eyes shifted from the azure flames to the azure crystals, Hinata believed she had caught a glimpse of Naruto's true soul. What she had seen was nothing less than complete chaos. But at the same time, perfect order. A raging maelstrom, chaotic and uncontrollable. And yet, spinning in a perfect spiral. Never leaving its defined route. Naruto's soul could only be described as ordered chaos. And that was where the new desire came from. Hinata wished to know. She wanted to know who this real Naruto was. He seemed so much more than the Naruto she thought she knew. The old Naruto was just a boy. This new Naruto seemed inhuman. As if he had somehow transcended humanity itself. Yesterday, she hadn't been able to find him. Her father had wanted another test on her performance after her meeting with her new team. Today, however, after her genin test, she had asked Kurenai's sensei where Team 7 was meeting. Though curious, her sensei had told her. She had briefly worried that her new teammates, namely Kiba, might try and follow her, to see why she was so interested in Team 7. Her affections of Naruto were known to only a few in her class. Thankfully, Shino was one of those few, and had held the dog boy back. She had arrived just in time to see Naruto leave, with her close behind, though not enough to be seen. She had long ago perfected the art of Naruto stalking, though she had perfected it against the old Naruto. The new Naruto might not be so easy to fool. But it seemed to work. She had followed him to a very secluded area on top of the Hokage monument, his training area she had realized. The Hyuga heiress had been surprised to find that she had not been the only one following Naruto. But to see his sensei following him was no surprise she supposed, as he might be curious as to Naruto's change too. And so she had charged her ears with chakra to listen to what they were talking about. Needless to say, she almost blew her cover several times in shock. Now, almost 4 hours later, Hinata had had her entire conception of Naruto turned on its head, and yet, she only admired and respected him even more because of it. She had almost begun weeping in sympathy when he had talked about how he was the container of Kyuubi no Kitsune and how she had realized how hard his life must have been. Coincidentally, she found her respect and loyalty for the village dropping considerably, as she knew his already had. She now knew that her feelings for him were no passing crush like those fangirls had for Sasuke. Her feelings for him were genuine. Whether or not he would ever return them, she didn't know, but she did hope beyond hope that he would. But he didn't even know her. Hell, he didn't even know that she knew this much about him. Or so she thought. You can come out now, Hinata. A small smile came to Naruto's face as he heard a soft, eep, sound come from behind him on the edge of the clearing. Shaking his head in amusement, he turned around to where he knew the sound had come from, and where its originator was hiding, a mirth-filled grin spreading on his face. I know you're there. So either you come out or we drag you out. Behind the tree, Hinata's breathing had gone into overdrive. He knew she was there. Suddenly, that desire to know what made the object of her affections tick seemed to vanish, replaced by her normal shyness. Even though he knew she was there, she just couldn't bring herself to face him. Part of her just wished he'd just ignore her and let her go. Wait, what did he mean by, we? He means this if you're wondering. Hinata looked up, her eyes wide, to find several Narutos standing in the trees behind her own. Howdy did. Why you? Know you were here. Hinata felt like she jumped a few feet up when she heard a voice behind her. Glancing back to the clearing, she found herself gazing into those infinite blue orbs once again. But this time, they held neither the all-consuming flames, nor the all-seeing crystals, nor the uncontrollable lightning. No, this time it was as if she was staring into a pair of cyclones. She almost felt herself getting dizzy as she gazed into their depths. And these blue cyclones, it was as if they held the very wind itself. Freedom, happiness, mirth, all of these and more seemed to be thrust out at her from those eyes. It made her almost disappointed that his words broke her from that spell. Taking her silence as a yes, Naruto continued. Well, you heard what I told Kakashi-sensei, right? My recon clones can see through Anbu-level concealment techniques. You didn't even come close to sneaking past these guys. he explained, gesturing to the clones in the trees, who were nodding to themselves in self-satisfaction. Hinata was broken from the spell his eyes cast on her just enough to hear what he said. And while she was disheartened to hear how badly she had failed at her hiding skill, she was more concentrated at analyzing the boy in front of her. Naruto's current poise was nothing like what she had seen the day before. While it was little laid back and still held some of the tempting air and random tendency, it mainly was filled with mirth and amusement. His eyes seemed to shine with mirth, and combined with an amused half-grin on his face, he practically radiated it. Hinata was quickly feeling her lips curl up in a smile of her own. He must have been contagious. But it was what he said next that amazed her. But I will say, for a genin, that was a pretty good concealment. I don't think anyone else in the class had one that good. I think it might even be a little better than my own. Her pale eyes widened at this. Naruto had just complimented her? He had just said her efforts weren't a complete failure? He had even said they were as good as his own? Surely he had to be just saying that. No, it really isn't that good. You don't have to try to make me feel better like that. That was odd, she had just said that without a single stutter. Naruto raised his eyebrows in curiosity as he tried to process what the girl in front of him meant. You think I'm lying just to make you feel better? Listen, Hinata, I don't do that. Now Hinata's eyebrows rose as she tried to process what the boy in front of her meant. Hey, feeding someone false information, even if it is for good intentions, never does any good, that's what I say. If they've done something wrong, you should tell them what they did wrong so they won't do it again. I mean, if you don't know what you did wrong, then you're just going to repeat it, don't you agree? Now Hinata's eyes were wide with wonder. It did make sense what he was saying. And if he was right, then he wasn't just lying to make her feel better. She was actually doing something good. It was at that point that her normal shyness took over. Yeah, I guess you're right. Even though she seemed to have suddenly gotten over her stutter, she was still having trouble talking to the boy she secretly loved. I have to get going. With that she turned to leave. But Naruto wasn't having any of that. Oh no, you don't. Grabbing Hinata's wrist, Naruto yanked her towards him and started pulling her out into the clearing. Naruto-kun. What are you? Hey, I know you came here to talk to me, and if your own shyness is going to get in the way of that, then I'll just have to help you that now, won't I? He said while flashing her a grin she found eerily similar to his characteristic grin from before his change. Why was he doing this, she wondered. Why was he going out of his way to help her like this? Meanwhile, even though he didn't show it, Naruto himself was pondering that same question. Why was he doing this? After all, he hardly knew Hinata. So why did he even allow her past the picket lines of recon clones he set up around his training area? Why did he allow her to listen in on his conversation with Kakashi? What had she done to become worthy of knowing that information? It didn't take long for his mind to remind him of the answer to that question. She had been kind to him. Out of all of his classmates, who had either shunned him, been mean or cruel to him, or in rare cases been merely indifferent, heck, not just his class, the whole village, Hinata had been the only one to show true kindness towards him. He may not have noticed her before the awakening, as he was now calling the events that lead to him becoming a genin, but now, things were different. Really, it wasn't like the shy girl was the first thing on his mind after the incident. It wasn't until the genin assignments that he had begun to see what set her apart from all the rest. And even then, it was merely by chance at that. As he had predicted, his entry into the genin assignment room had caused quite a stir. He had also been ready with a remark to any outburst that would leave pretty much everyone in shock. Humans are such predictable creatures after all. But it was after that, when he had been observing the stunned and disbelieving reactions of his peers with his own pseudo-sadistic satisfaction, courtesy of Antheros, when, purely by chance, his eyes landed on her. At first, he thought she was just as stunned as everyone else, but as he began to shift to Zek's uncaring indifference, he noticed something else in her eyes. Something he didn't quite believe at first. Concern. At first, he thought he might have been seeing things, but that was soon crushed by Zek's indifference and his own. The idea that someone else could show concern for him wasn't shocking at all, not because he might have expected it thanks to the naivete of his former self, but rather it was that after the awakening, he found that it was extremely difficult for him to be shocked by anything. Sure, he might not have been expecting something to happen, it was just that he could now accept new information far more easily, a trait he knew would come in very handy as a shinobi. He didn't know for sure whether or not he was seeing things or not, but he was able to test the theory. While his whole conversation with Shikamaru and Shino may have been partly for his own amusement in messing with the heads of everyone else. And what fun it was seeing them squirm like that. Throughout the entire conversation, a very informative and intellectual conversation in his mind, or maybe Drax perhaps, he would occasionally glance to Hinata. Not enough for anyone to notice, but enough to get a reading on her emotions. While everyone else near the trio had been in states of shock, disbelief and general, WTF. Hinata's had been different. While her expression still held shock, it had also held a look of curiosity, as well as wonder and, even though he was unsure of this, a small bit of admiration. Needless to say, it gave Naruto a lot to think about after he had met with his so-called team. Speaking of his pompousness, King Emo with the bijou-sized ego and his annoying bipolar bitch of a fangirl with OCD and a broken mute button, he'd have to put them in their places. Antheros and Zex would see to that. At least Kakashi seemed like someone he could get along with. What was he thinking about before? Oh yeah, Hinata. The night before, Naruto had spent a little while thinking over what he had seen in that room. Why would Hinata show concern for him? That question led him to think over what he knew about the girl. After all, it wasn't like he had lost his memories of his life before the awakening. All of his memories were still there, he just needed to go over them with his new, critical eye, mind. And what he had found in his memories was interesting, to say the least. For almost his entire time at the academy, she had been there, watching him. Not like Sasuke's fangirls. Though an easy connection to make it certainly was, she had been standing on the sidelines, watching him throughout the years at the academy, and through all of his memories of her, there was always expressions on her face that shared a commonality. How her eyes were filled with concern whenever he seemed about to fail a test. How they were filled with sympathy when he did fail. How they were filled with happiness when he passed a test or did something well. How they would be filled with a flash of anger whenever he was being picked on or teased. Although these were only scattered memories, they were more than enough to give Naruto his answer. Hinata cared for him. He wasn't sure as to why she would like him of all people, but he had figured out why she hadn't approached him sooner. It didn't take a genius to figure out that Hinata was indecisive and shy. Now while Naruto did think that was a bad quality to have, he also knew that it was nothing that couldn't be helped. And in his mind, the best way to start would be to start helping her break out of that shell she seemed to have erected around herself. By the time the two genin reached the large boulder in the middle of the clearing, Naruto had released Hinata, who was now following him. Hopping up onto the boulder with a chakra-enhanced jump, Naruto reached down to help Hinata up. That action alone made her cheeks flush red. Desperately hoping that he wouldn't notice, Hinata instead opted to follow his example and leapt up next to him on the boulder with her own chakra-enhanced jump. But just as she landed, she regretted it. She hadn't taken Naruto-kun's offer to help her, he must hate her now. Whoa. So you know how to enhance your jumps with chakra? I'd say that's pretty impressive for someone just out of the academy. Hinata's eyes widened. Had she just impressed him again? No, he had to be mistaken. And no, it's nothing special. I mean, you can do it too. She spoke. Her familiar stutter seemed to be leaving again. Well yeah, Naruto replied, but I doubt very many others from our class can do that yet. My own so-called teammates sure as hell can't. Sasuke-san. But isn't he the rookie of the year? Hinata replied, a bit shocked but more trying to support her own self-demeaning beliefs. Well then, I'd say he's a bit undeserving of that title. If anything, I'd say either of us could kick his ass if we wanted to, he shot back with a confident grin that made Hinata shiver slightly. And no, I could never. Hinata tried to compile some kind of answer to what Naruto had said. She could never do that. Sasuke was the rookie of the year, and even though she wasn't part of his fan club, she shivered in fear at the thought of that. She did acknowledge the fact that he was probably the most skilled of their class, apart from Naruto-kun after his change of course. She was not so blindly faithful to have believed that Naruto was unbeatable like Sasuke's fan club thought of the Uchiha. But she did know that Naruto had become far stronger than any of them in the week following the graduation exam. Sighing, Naruto sat down, motioning Hinata to do the same. You know something, Hinata? You really shouldn't think so badly of yourself, he said in a soft voice as he stared out at the sun that was now beginning to dip lower towards the horizon. His voice had lost most of its mirth and he now spoke with a kind wisdom. Hinata's eyes widened slightly as she sat down. She had nothing to say to that. She knew it was true, but she just. I know, I can't, you can't what? Naruto asked as he turned his head to look at her, his eyes filled with sage-like wisdom and full of a kind of caring Hinata couldn't place. Look Hinata, I know you came here for answers about my changes, and now you have them. But we both know that's not all you came here to do. Hinata looked down, almost in shame, as she thought how right he was. She hadn't just come here to get answers. She came here to talk to Naruto. She wanted not just to get answers, but to get to know Naruto. To finally overcome her shyness and maybe at last try to be his friend. But now, wasn't she accomplishing just that? You know something Hinata? Naruto began, his voice beginning to fill with mirth again. You're a lot stronger than you may think. You probably could have come out at the top of the class, higher than even Sasuke. Higher than even me since I hadn't changed at that point. Hinata was about to contradict that, saying that she wasn't anything special, that she was just a failure, but Naruto didn't allow her to. Raising a hand to tell her to stop, he continued, his eyes darkening slightly, yet still filled with caring and mirth. It was a very strange and yet at the same time intriguing. Don't say it. Don't say that you're nothing special, that you're just a failure. Don't say it. Don't think it. Don't think that you're a failure, because you're not. You have far more potential than you know Hinata. I remember how you did in the academy, and from what I saw you were anything but a failure. You could easily learn information and did well on tests. I can tell that you're probably as smart as Sakura, smarter even, since your thoughts aren't clouded by some pointless mockery of what one would call affection or love. In the taijutsu courses, you showed amazing flexibility and coordination, far more than anyone else. You could do far more than you know, you have all the makings of a great shinobi. The only thing holding you back is that self-demeaning attitude of yours. And why do you think that anyway? Why should you think so little of yourself? Why would you be a failure? Sure, you're shy and a bit indecisive, but think of the positives. You're from one of the most prestigious clans in Konoha. You have one of the most powerful bloodlines in the world, and you can use it, unlike Sasuke. You have the strength, the smarts, and the power to be a great kunoichi. So why Hinata? Why do you think you're a failure? He spoke in that voice full of wisdom and that strange care. Hinata was awestruck. Normally, she would have simply accepted what Naruto was saying as more berating, that it was her shyness that made her a failure. But it was the tone and the way he said it that made all the difference. He was asking it like he already knew the answer, as if this was some kind of test for her. No, not a test. He wasn't the one who needed to ask this question, he wanted her to ask herself that question. Why? Why was she a failure? The answer came to her quickly. Well, my father said that. She spoke softly as she drooped her head down. Your father? Naruto asked, his eyes widened slightly and a small but obvious bit of concern in his voice. Your father was the reason why you're a failure. And no, he was the one who told me. Now Naruto's eyes widened further with surprise. They quickly began to harden though as he spoke, his voice laced with curiosity, but with an underlying tone of venom, as if waiting to be let loose. Your father thinks you're a failure, Hinata nodded. And that's why you think you're a failure? Because your father thinks so? She nodded again. Naruto's eyes had now hardened completely, and were dark but still held that strange care, though the mirth was gone completely. He turned his head forward again and gazed out at the sun. Why? Hinata looked up as he spoke. Why does he think you're a failure? It's a long story, she said, hoping to deter him, even if in her heart, she knew that was impossible. Especially since part of her wanted to tell him. To tell anyone really. I got plenty of time. Well, I guess it all started when I was 3, when I started my Juroken training, and so Hinata told him about pretty much her entire life. At first it was hard, and there were many times when she was afraid she was boring him, but throughout all of her narrative, he was listening. He would occasionally nod in understanding or look in confirmation. As she continued, it got easier, and soon she was pouring her entire life's story out to him, her own feelings and actions towards him omitted of course. She told him about how the normal Juroken was so hard for her, about the death of her uncle, Hizashi, and how her cousin Neji now hated the main house for it. She told him about her mother's death and how she had been so crushed by it. She told him how her father had gotten so distant, about how her Juroken training seemed so hard and how she had fallen behind in it. She told him how her cousin and her little sister would beat her in those sparring matches, and how her father seemed so disappointed in her skill. How he called her weak and a failure. How this had spread through the rest of the clan and how many of the Hyuga in general now regarded her as an insult to the clan. She told him everything. By the end of her story, the sun was already sinking quickly towards the horizon. Naruto was now sitting with one knee bent upward which his arm was resting on. He was staring out at the horizon, his eyes closed as if in contemplation, as if he were trying to absorb and process all he had just heard. But the edges of his mouth were twitching, as if he were fighting back a scowl. Hinata was about to ask him if he was all right when he let out a sigh and opened his eyes as he gazed upward. He sounds like a real asshole if you ask me. Hinata's eyes went wide in shock. Naruto had just said that? About her father? Hiashi Hyuga? No, he couldn't be right. And no, you're wrong. You don't what? Naruto turned to her, scowling in anger, but anger not directed at her. Don't understand. You just told me everything about your life, and from what I've heard, that's a pretty apt term to describe him. Hinata was about to continue when she realized he was right. She had just told him almost everything about the man. Naruto was anything but ignorant of the situation. But, did that mean he was right? Naruto pressed the subject. Hinata, no offense, but he's done nothing but belittle, discourage, and been downright cruel to you for almost your entire life. How can you even call a man like that your father? Instead of trying to help you adapt the Jurken to your own style, he just forced you to learn the normal Jurken that you have such trouble with. And instead of calling your shyness and compassion a weakness and berating you for having it, he should have been helping you adapt to it. He should have been helping you and your sister equally, not throwing you to the side like a piece of trash at the first sign of a problem with you. A problem, I might add, that can be easily remedied. The reason you're such a failure, as your father puts it, isn't because of you, it's because of him. Instead of simply belittling and degrading you for being any less than what he thought might be ideal for the clan, he should have been helping you to become someone who was. Naruto's eyes were now dark but at the same time held that kind wisdom. He slowly turned his eyes away from Hinata and bowed his head as he closed them and spoke in a soft, almost sad, voice. And, I don't mean to sound selfish, but I can't see how you could respect a man who would see an innocent child put to death. Hinata's pale eyes widened in shock and horror as what Naruto meant set in. You can't mean, I do. He's been part of the faction that's been trying to get me put to death since I was born, Naruto answered, his face solemn as he glanced up at Hinata, his eyes soft and compassionate. Hinata was still trying to process the information Naruto had given her. Her father had tried to kill Naruto because of Kyuubi. She knew that he probably wouldn't approve of any relationship with the blonde, but now he. Wait, why should I care what he thinks about me? Naruto's words from before now truly began to sink in and take root. What had Hiashi done to earn her respect? As Naruto had put, he had done nothing but belittle and degrade her for almost her entire life. And he had even tried to condemn Naruto to death. No, he didn't deserve it. Hinata now wanted, almost desperately, to hate her father, but she couldn't. Despite all he had done to her, she knew that in his heart he still loved her, that and he was still family. She couldn't bring herself to hate her own father. But that didn't mean she had to respect him either. Naruto's lips curled into a wry grin as he saw Hinata's hand clinch into a fist. Now do you understand? Hinata's eyes opened as she brought that hand in front of her face, as if she was trying to read something in it. Why she had made it into a fist. She soon had her answer. Yes I do, she said as a look of conviction appeared on her face. Naruto's smirk turned into a mirth-filled grin as he looked away towards the sun that had almost reached the horizon. You're taking your first step into a greater world, Hinata, he said. But you still have a ways to go to realize your full potential. Hinata smiled softly as she thought of it. I'm sure my sensei can help me along. I'm sure she can, Naruto said as he got to his feet, still staring at the falling golden sun. But, that doesn't mean you can't accept other help, does it? He finished as he turned to face her. Hinata's eyes widened once again as she realized what Naruto was implying. Why you don't mean, she said, trying to form a coherent sentence as her cheeks began to redden. Naruto chuckled as he turned his head to the side, back towards Konoha. I come here every day after 1 o'clock to train. And since I don't like either of my teammates, it would be nice if I had a training partner. He spoke again as he turned back to her, the burning sun directly behind him. Hinata gulped as she hoped beyond hope she was right about what he was implying. Extending his hand to her, Naruto spoke. "You're welcome to join me if you want, Hinata-chan." Hinata looked up into his eyes in admiration and awe. His face now consisted of all his previous emotions. The confident smirk, the kind wisdom, and the bright mirth. His eyes were even brighter, with all the emotions she'd seen before in them, and more. The all-consuming azure fire, the all-seeing azure crystals, the flowing azure water, the crackling blue lightning, and the swirling azure cyclones. And yet, for the first time, she felt no compulsion to faint at all. And for the first time in a long while, she smiled. Sure. With that, she took his hand in her own. Today had been a good day, Naruto decided as Hinata left the clearing. He still wasn't quite sure of what to make of Hinata, but her feelings were sincere, and that was all that mattered to him. She had cared about him for the entire time they were at the academy. She was the only one who hadn't scorned him or hated him. Sure, she hadn't really been nice to him, but that was only to her shyness, something that could be easily remedied in Naruto's eyes. The least he could do in return was to help her with her problems and try to be her friend. And maybe one day, perhaps more. Naruto was broken from his musings as he realized he still needed something important to do. Something he had meaning to do for a long time now. After a quick mental scan to check on his clones, Naruto sat down on the large boulder and assumed a lotus position. Closing his eyes, Naruto cleared his mind of any obtrusive thoughts, and turned his awareness inward so that it began scanning his entire mind for the one thing that was most integral to his plans as a shinobi. "Alright Kyuubi, where are you?" It was an odd feeling to say the least. As he concentrated, Naruto felt his awareness of the outside world drift away, like he was falling asleep. But at the same time, he was not sleepy at all. He wasn't exactly sure what was happening, but it was something unnatural. And right now, unnatural was good. As his awareness of the outside world left completely, Naruto was made aware of other things, things that made him realize that he was not in the clearing anymore, at least not consciously. The first thing he realized was a dampness surrounding his legs, meaning he must be sitting in water, or some other kind of liquid. The second thing was a sound, a soft plonk, repeating over and over again. The sound of dripping water. Finally, he could feel no form of wind, and he had learned the clearing where he trained was often very windy. Slowly and deliberately opening his eyes, Naruto glanced about his current location and uttered only a single word. Interesting. He was currently in what appeared to be a large sewer of some kind. Only, it was not circular sewer, but rectangular and very large. Also, the lack of any refuse was rather obvious, something Naruto was thankful for. The only form of light came through grates in the ceiling, and small neon lights on the walls. But at the same time, Naruto realized that despite the low light conditions, he could see fine. Better than usual even, as he had always had heightened senses. Something he was willing to bet Kyuubi had something to do with. Getting to his feet, Naruto noticed something else that proved his theory that he was no longer in the physical world. As his legs left the water, all of the water and dampness left them. His pants' legs didn't even remain wet. Naruto was immediately struck by an interesting thought. If this was a manifestation of his mind, shouldn't he be able to control it at will? Deciding to test that theory, he looked to one of the neon lights. Concentrating, Naruto willed it to become brighter. Not a second after he began concentrating, the light increased in brightness to the exact point he envisioned it. His lips curling into a smirk, Naruto returned the light to its original brightness. He'd have to test the limits of what he could alter here at some point. But at the moment, he had more pressing issues to take care of. Walking down the massive hallway, Naruto noticed several other corridors branching off from the main one. Glancing down one, Naruto found that although he could see fine in the main corridor, the way down the other ones was shrouded in complete darkness. If Naruto had to guess, it was some way of concealing what lay within unless he actually went down there. Deciding to just wing it, Naruto stated down this corridor. The corridor seemed to stretch on indefinitely. However, as he progressed, the darkness before him melted away, and began encroaching on the way behind him. When the opening into the main corridor had been completely obscured, Naruto saw what he had to guess was the end of the tunnel. He could make out a gleaming light at the end, obscuring his view just as the darkness had before. However, unlike the darkness, the light did not recede as Naruto approached it. Instead, Right as Naruto reached the veritable wall of light, it vanished, leaving Naruto free to examine what lay beyond. As he beheld this new chamber, the blonde's lips curled upward in a triumphant grin. Jackpot! The chamber was huge. The walls on his left and right were roughly 3 times as far apart as the corridors had been. And the ceiling was even taller. Naruto couldn't even make out the ceiling, just darkness roughly 100 feet above him. Another interesting fact that Naruto noticed was that the water around him seemed to have deepened an inch or two in this room. In length, the room was as long as it was wide, or at least that was as much as Naruto could see. But what most caught Naruto's attention was the wall in front of him, or rather, the lack of one. Instead of a wall opposite him, there were merely giant bars going up into the darkness. Naruto instantly knew just what he was looking at. A cage. About halfway up to the darkened part of the room on the cage, there was a simple piece of paper with the kanji for seal. That clenched it. This was what he was looking for. As Naruto approached the bars, he could make out, if only faintly, what was behind them. And he wasn't surprised in the least at what he saw. A titanic silhouette with occasionally visible glints of orange. And behind it, 9 massive tails swirled, as if with a mind of their own. When Naruto finally stood before the massive cage, gazing up at the great beast within it, massive eyes the size of small houses opened and gazed down at him. Eyes filled with malice, hate, and superiority. Eyes that looked down at him as if he were nothing more than an annoying insect. Eyes dyed a bloody crimson, and laced with a kind of evil that would make even the greatest of shinobi cower in fear before them. Naruto didn't even flinch. Kyuubi, I presume? He could just barely make out the beast's lips curl upward ever so slightly into a look of what Naruto guessed was amusement. The entire chamber seemed to rumble as a dark voice laced with pure darkness sounded from within, sending small waves rippling through the water. Hello, boy? Naruto didn't respond at all to the taunt, merely keeping his confident smirk as he took another step towards the bars, stopping at about 10 feet away. The great demon's lips curled up, changing from a dark smirk to a grin, revealing his massive teeth that had to be at least 15 feet long. It was an expression that practically radiated pure evil and contempt. You're more foolish than I thought, whelp. The blonde simply raised an eyebrow in curiosity. Oh? Naruto asked, his hands currently resting in his pockets. The beast's eyes suddenly lit up in something Naruto could immediately place. He knew that look. A look of someone who thinks they've won. And that was the only warning he got before Kyuubi's massive claws, each the size of a warehouse, shot out from between the bars, poised to crush him like an ant. The claws moved at lightning speed, smashing into Naruto with the force of an avalanche and creating a massive blast of water flying everywhere. Throughout the chamber, Kyuubi's dark laugh reverberated. Kyuubi's cackle of victory lasted only a second, however, as the water settled back and he beheld his jailer. There, having not even moved an inch from his spot, was Naruto. His right arm was raised as his hand grasped one of Kyuubi's massive claws. His left hand was still resting in his pocket. But it was the look on his face that truly shocked Kyuubi. A look of pure confidence. As if Kyuubi was no more than an annoyance that could be flicked aside with no effort at all. It seems like you were the fool here. In shock, and perhaps even fear, Kyuubi tried to pull his claws back inside. But to no avail. Naruto had the offending claw in an iron grip, even though his hand could not even begin to reach around it. It felt as if his claw was buried in a mountain, and completely irremovable. Naruto's smile darkened as he added insult to injury. With no more than a flick of his wrist, he snapped the end of the claw right off. The act caused little actual pain to Kyuubi, as he didn't have many nerve endings going into his claws, and in all actuality, a broken claw was not much of an injury. It was who had made the injury that so shocked Kyuubi. This human, this boy, had stopped an attack that would have shattered mountains like it was nothing more than a leaf in a calm breeze. He had then snapped through a material that was stronger than the greatest metals known to man like it was a toothpick. Just who was this boy? I think you're forgetting something, Kyuubi. Naruto spoke as he hefted the broken claw. A claw the size of shed, over his shoulder. This is my mind. With that, Naruto hurled the broken claw at incredible speed, so fast that it began to heat up from air friction, striking Kyuubi right in the left eye with perfect accuracy. The titanic demon howled in pain as roughly half his eye was melted away from the impact. When he finally looked back at Naruto, his gaze was no longer filled with the high aloofness of before. It had been replaced with pure, unadulterated rage. His pride had been all but destroyed by this, boy. How dare you? Naruto's expression had morphed into one of dark amusement and satisfaction at seeing how easily the Demon Lord could be manipulated. Do not think for an instant that you have won. I have leveled entire nations. I have brought empires to their knees with a single thought. You are nothing compared to me, whelp. I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation you're in, Kyuubi. I can do far worse than simply injure your precious pride, Naruto replied, his eyes closed. This made Kyuubi chuckle in amusement. You, do your worst, boy. Naruto's eyes suddenly snapped open and his expression changed into one that would have made any human cringe. A look of psychotic madness. A look of sadistic pleasure. Gladly, with that he drew his hands out of his pockets and raised them up, his palms pointed towards the ground and his fingers outstretched but at the same time partially curled. Kyuubi raised a massive eyebrow, wondering what the blonde could possibly be planning. Then, his world exploded in pain. The entire chamber lit up as blue lightning shot from Naruto's fingers, splitting into hundreds of other arcs, and impacting Kyuubi with unbelievable force. Naruto's grin only widened as he curled his fingers slightly, increasing the current, and increasing the volume of Kyuubi's howls of pain. The lightning arced across Kyuubi, carrying through his body, burning his skin and innards. Desperately, the fox tried to move, but found that the electricity was causing his muscles to contort and cramp. Had enough? Somehow, Naruto's voice rang clearly in Kyuubi's ears. Never, Kyuubi roared, his pure anger finally overcoming his pain. With a final howl, he threw his massive tails forward, fully intent on crushing the insolent boy before him like the ant that he was. Naruto merely shook his head. Right as the tails reached him, Naruto cut the current from his left hand, pointing his palm at the 9 tails, each at least a mile long. The tails stopped in their tracks. How? Kyuubi began to stammer. Kyuubi, you still don't understand. Naruto shook his head in disappointment. With that, he cut the lightning completely and raised his hands further. In here, he began as he extending his fingers completely and closed his eyes, opening himself up completely, fully willing what he wanted his mindscape to become. As the lightning flew again, his eyes snapped open. I am God. Instead of hitting Kyuubi, the lightning arced around the entire chamber, blasting every surface. Naruto himself rose into the air, his arms outstretched. Then, the entire chamber shattered. Kyuubi stared in shock and awe as the entire chamber fell away to reveal a place that practically defied logic. The seemed to be outside now, the sky was black as night and filled with stars. The horizon was completely illuminated by orange and purple light, as if the sun existed around its entire perimeter. But it was where the ground was supposed to be that truly shocked Kyuubi. Instead of land or even sea, there was only chaos. Below them was a swirling maelstrom of dark purple energy, crackling with black lighting. The vortex seemed to extend to the very horizon itself. The pitch-black center of the storm sat below them. How far, Kyuubi could not fathom. Somehow, he had not begun to fall, as if he was floating just as Naruto was. Speaking of the blonde, Kyuubi's gaze turned back to the boy who seemed to defy everything Kyuubi thought possible in a human. Naruto was currently floating before Kyuubi, having moved a good distance from the fox. His hands currently rested at his sides. All around him, the blue lightning crackled. The lighting arced off of his skin and danced around him in an aura of power. Behind him, the lightning seemed to have coalesced into 6 wings that emerged from his shoulders and arced bolts of energy themselves. The entire display was mystifying and terrifying at the same time, even to Kyuubi. But it was his eyes that made Kyuubi's own widen in shock. Instead of the ocean blue of before, they were a gleaming silver, eyes that practically radiated power. As his eyes opened, Naruto raised his hands up, as if trying to pull something from the heavens themselves. Not a second later, that's exactly what happened. As Kyuubi looked up in curiosity, he saw what Naruto was calling. A massive crystal, as large as Konoha's Hokage mountain, floated down directly above Kyuubi. It was a gleaming silver, shining as bright as Naruto's eyes. Then, more followed. 5 more crystals, each roughly half the size of the first, floated down around Kyuubi in a pentagonal formation. Each was a different color. One was a fiery red, another a pale white, a third an ocean blue, while a fourth was a shining copper, and the last was a sparkling yellow. Naruto then brought his left hand out to his side, while bringing his right directly down, as if coordinating movement through hand signals. With that, even more crystals, 20 of them in total, each completely transparent, formed in front of the 5 colored crystals surrounding him, 4 in front of each arranged in a diamond. With that, Naruto's hands returned to his sides and he let out a low sigh, as if the ordeal had exhausted him. Or at least that was what Kyuubi was hoping for. If the child had exhausted himself, then maybe he could overpower the boy. That notion was soon crushed as Naruto smirked darkly and raised his left hand. Kyuubi thought for a moment that he was in for another electrocution like before. But instead of pointing the hand at the demon, Naruto instead pointed his outstretched hand at the silver crystal above them. Then, all of the lightning arcing off of him seemed to move, coalescing around his left hand. Then, Naruto stretched out his fingers, and the bolts flew. A blast of lightning far greater than any before shot from his hand, so powerful that Kyuubi could feel the shockwave it created. The blast impacted the crystal with massive force, but the crystal did not so much as move. Instead, it seemed to absorb the electricity. As it did, the crystal seemed to shine even brighter, becoming so bright as to rival the sun. Just as Kyuubi thought it could become no brighter, Naruto stopped the blast. Not a second later, the crystal began letting off a low but deep humming sound, and Kyuubi feared it might explode, and with him in such close proximity, that would be quite painful. But instead, just as the sound reached its peak, the crystal shot a blast of pure silver energy up into the sky in a massive beam of light. Kyuubi thought at first that maybe Naruto had made a mistake in what just happened. But he was beginning to realize just what the blonde might be planning, and he didn't like it. As the beam shot up even further, it suddenly split into 5 smaller beams. These smaller blasts of energy arced away from their original path, shooting off towards the horizons. That did not last long either though. After a few seconds, the beams arced downwards, slowing turning back towards Kyuubi and Naruto. Kyuubi had little time to reflect on this however as the beams shot towards him, each impacting one of the 5 colored crystals surrounding him. The gemstones each began charging with power like the silver one before them. As they did though, lightning began crackling off them, leaping to the clear crystals in front of them. When those crystals began to be charged, they began to spin in a circle, each group of 4 spinning in front of their respective colored crystal. When each of the colored crystals seemed to reach their peak of power, and the spinning crystals were spinning so fast as to only appear as 4 rings of crackling energy, Naruto gave a simple wave of his hand. With that, Kyuubi's world entered a whole new spectrum of pain. The spinning crystals unleashed a blast of lightning like Naruto had before, hitting Kyuubi with a force 5 times force than what Naruto had inflicted on him before. But it didn't stop there. Each of the massive colored crystals suddenly released a beam of pure energy, much like the silver beams that had impacted them, only the beams had been amplified 10-fold. The beams hit Kyuubi with the force of a meteor, and burned him with the heat of the sun itself. Kyuubi, he couldn't move, he couldn't think, he couldn't see, he couldn't feel anything. All he knew was the pain. Nothing in his entire life existence had hurt him as much as this, not even his sealing inside of Naruto 12 years ago. The beams vaporized his fur, incinerated his skin, and turned his muscles to ash. Had he been capable of coherent thought, he probably would have wondered why he wasn't dead yet. Everything had seemed to become timeless. He couldn't tell how long he had been like this. Seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, years. He could have been like this for millennia for all he knew. But then, through all the pain, misery, torment and suffering, his ears, long since burned away he thought, could discern one sound. The sharp crack of someone snapping their fingers. And just like that, it was over. Kyuubi slowly opened his eyes. How they survived he had no idea, and gazed out blindly at the one who had crushed him like a feeble ant. Naruto stood, floating, in front of the fox. If Kyuubi's mind had not been trying to recover from the unearthly pain he had just been feeling, he would have been shocked at the expression adorning the blonde's face. Naruto's expression was completely different from before. Instead of a look of dark satisfaction or sadistic pleasure, his face instead was one of sympathy and regret. Naruto looked over Kyuubi's battered and bloodied form. His eyes were filled with sympathy at what Kyuubi was feeling. When he had first come into his mindscape to meet the demon, this was not what he had intended to happen. But Kyuubi had seen him as no more than an insignificant bug, and had even tried to kill him. So Naruto, in a moment of Antheros-induced sadism, had decided to show Kyuubi who was boss here. He truly did not want to put Kyuubi through this, but he had been asking for it. Naruto knew that Kyuubi would be an invaluable ally and possibly one day a good friend. And they were in this together, so why should they hate each other? Sure, Kyuubi had been part of the cause the village hated him, but that was merely in an indirect sense. Had Naruto been of the mindset of his previous self, he probably would have impulsively blamed Kyuubi for all his problems. But that wasn't true. For one thing, it had been the Yondaime who had picked Naruto as the one to bear the burden of carrying the demon, and even then, it was the villagers themselves who had decided to ignore logic and make Naruto their scapegoat for all their anger at Kyuubi. Speaking of the fox, Naruto moved himself closer to the practically catatonic demon lord. He truly did look like shit. Worse even. The beams that Naruto had hit him with were hotter than the flames of the sun itself. If it weren't for the fact that Naruto had willed it, Kyuubi would probably have been completely vaporized in the first few seconds. And even then, he still looked like he had just taken a 6-hour bath in molten slag mixed with acid. His skin had been completely burned away and the muscles underneath had been cauterized. He was willing to bet most of the blood in his body had been cauterized, and his bones had probably been warped by the heat. And his internal organs had probably been turned to mush from all the electricity. If this had been in the real world, the fox would be long dead by now. Poor bastard. Sighing, Naruto floated up right in front of Kyuubi's head. Closing his eyes and letting out another breath, Naruto placed his palm on the fox's massive nose, or what was left of it anyway. Extending his will out to the mindscape around him, Naruto began his attempt to reason with the great demon as the space around them was bathed in white light. Kyuubi's eyes suddenly snapped open. Wait, his eyes? Weren't they just burned away? As he tired to figure that out, he noticed something else incredible. All his wounds, they were healed. Healed like they never existed. His left eye had been healed, and even the claw Naruto had broken off was back. Glancing around, Kyuubi found that he was back in the sewer-like chamber in the cage that had been his home for the past 12 years. Was that? No, it wasn't a dream. Kyuubi's eyes darted down to find Naruto standing before the massive cage again, like nothing had even happened. As I said before, I can make anything happen in here, including healing all of your injuries. Naruto's face was now one of neutrality. His face held no real expression, just one that showed kindness, but at the same time demanded attention and respect. Why? Why would you do that? Kyuubi was shocked at what the blonde had just done. One minute he was putting him through hell itself and the next he completely heals him like nothing happened. Naruto simply shrugged. I'm just not normally that kind of person. I didn't intend to do anything like that when I first came here. I just wanted to talk. But you seem to be in no position to listen to me. You thought I was no more than an annoyance and could take over easily. I just needed to show you exactly where you stand in this situation. Now that you know, can we sit down and talk about this like civilized beings like I intended when I first got here? Kyuubi was still speechless from what had just happened. This boy, who could have turned him to dust easily, was showing him mercy. Wasn't he the one who had made his life a living hell for the past 12 years? It just didn't seem like what a normal human would do. Humans were biased, prejudiced and hateful creatures. The blonde-haired child before him should have hated him. Unless... Kyuubi chuckled as the answer dawned on him, sending a low rumble resonating through the chamber. Naruto cocked his head to the side in curiosity. You're not human, aren't you? He stated more than asked, his lips curling into a knowing smirk. Naruto's own lips curled into a similar expression as he chuckled himself, his eyes closed. Not in mind, certainly. Humans are hateful, vindictive creatures. Their eyes are easily clouded by emotion. And above all else, they are quite stupid, as I have learned. They see with emotion and prejudice instead of logic and truth. Only a few of the masses see with logic and do not allow their eyes to be needlessly clouded. I may be human physically, but in mind, I am far different from the average human. Indeed, Kyuubi spoke, his head nodding in agreement, and yet, You don't consider yourself better, do you? No, Naruto replied. I am merely different. Whether or not my difference makes me better or not is up to the opinion of those around me. If they think that I am better, so be it. If they think it doesn't, so be that as well. There is no such thing as simply better. Stronger maybe. Smarter maybe. But not better. For oneself to think themselves better, they will only be led down the path of pride and arrogance, which shall ultimately lead to their downfall. The chamber rumbled again as Kyuubi broke out into a hearty laugh. Well then, if it's the opinion of others that matter, I think you have become better. To overcome such pointless things as pride and arrogance, you have surpassed most of your kind. Thank you. Naruto nodded towards the demon. But back to what I came here to talk to you about. Well, what is it? Alright then, Kyuubi, this is where things stand if you haven't noticed. I've studied Jinchuriki, and I know that now that I know if you're here, there will come a time in the future where I will need to call on your power. I know that with the seal I can probably use it without your consent, but I realized that with your help, I can use it far better and easily. So, my offer is this. I suggest that we make the both out of this situation that we're in, and help each other out. In exchange for helping me use your power, I'm willing to allow you a few amenities in here, within reason of course. We're going to be stuck together for the rest of our lives, so I'd rather be spending that time with someone I consider a friend than an enemy. So what do you say? You certainly know how to make a compelling argument, kid, and yes, I agree with you about our situation, so to answer your question, yes, I will help you. I do want a few things in exchange however, though I believe they will do you good in the long run as well. Alright. Shoot, first of all, you're going to have to allow me to increase the amount of my Yuki that's flowing into your body. You do know about that, right? Well, I did guess that was why I had such high chakra stores. Exactly. Anyway, if I increase the amount of my Yuki flowing into your body, it will grant me access to your senses and therefore, knowledge of the world outside this cage. From your end, this is a benefit as well. Your chakra stores will increase, as well as your healing factor, heightening your senses and boosting your speed, reflexes and strength. Basically a general upgrade of all your physical traits. You'll probably grow a little taller too. Finally, it will allow you to use my Yuki more effectively without it hurting you. Don't ask about that now, I'll tell you once we get started. As for drawbacks, you might start unconsciously drawing on my power when experiencing points of emotional stress, but with the control you have over your emotions I highly doubt that will become an issue. Sounds like a nice enough compromise. So how exactly do I go about doing this? Naruto asked. Quite simple really. You just have to start using my chakra more regularly. These changes won't happen all at once, instead it'll happen over time as you use my Yuki more and more. If you train with it daily, you should do fine. Though there is a way we can jumpstart the process if you're interested. Why'd I get the feeling it'll be painful? Naruto asked with a knowing look. Because it will. Kyuubi said with what Naruto knew had to be a grin. Don't worry, it shouldn't be too painful, I think. Naruto just shook his head. Oh well. I guess this is just too good to pass up anyway. What do I have to do? Nothing too complex, you just need to. Sasuke Uchiha was not happy at the moment. At first glance, one might think it was his current predicament, having to put up with the dreamy stares of the most enthusiastic member of his fan club. And the occasional times she would try to talk with him or ask him out on a date, and by occasional, he meant roughly every few minutes. Add the fact that they had been waiting on the small bridge their sensei had designated as their meeting spot for the past 2 hours, and you can imagine how his nerves could be extremely frayed. But that wasn't what was bugging Sasuke. He had long tuned out Sakura's annoying voice and time had seemingly just flew by as he had pondered the burning question in his head. Just who was Naruto Uzumaki? The day before yesterday, at the genin assignments, he wasn't sure what to make of the blonde. When the blonde had first come in, he had been just as shocked as everyone else. And even more so when he skillfully turned Kiba's taunt back on the dog boy. After that, Sasuke had merely tuned out everything else in the room, as he had sensed the approach of 2 of the most determined members of his fan club. He had long since learned how to tell when they were near. His anti-stalking reflex as he called it. Though when the teams were called, he had found it curious that Naruto seemed to be just as unhappy with being partnered with Sakura as he was. Even more impressive however, was that Naruto, who to Sasuke's knowledge had a tremendous crush on Sakura, seemed to completely abhor the fact that she was on his team, and Sasuke's respect for the blonde rose just a notch higher. It seemed as though Naruto had either gotten over his crush on Sakura, or he had forced her out of his mind. Either way, it was bound to make a better ninja out of him. That could only work to his favor. But what little respect he had for the blonde had been quickly worn away in the 3 hours they had waited for their sensei to arrive. After all of the other teams had left, and it was obvious they might be waiting for a while, Naruto did something that anyone with common sense would do. He found something to occupy his time. But it was what he had found that was what so infuriated Sasuke. When the last of the teams and Iruka had left, Naruto had glanced around, pulled a pencil out of his pocket, and proceeded to start tapping it on his desk. This continued for 3 hours. At first, Sasuke didn't think much of it, but when it was practically the only sound in the room, it got on his and Sakura's nerves rather quickly. Occasionally, he would accompany the tapping with the whistling of some strange tune that Sasuke couldn't place. But it was definitely wearing his nerves away into near non-existence. However, before he was driven to the point of losing it completely and beating the blonde into a bloody pulp, Sakura seemingly solved his problem for him. Screaming at the top of her lungs and jumping out of her seat, the pink-haired girl stomped up the blonde and was about to pummel him when something very odd had happened. As Sakura's fist connected with his face, Naruto had poofed into smoke to reveal a man in a Junin outfit. He was tall, easily 6 feet 4 inches. His first distinguishing feature was that he hid most of his distinguishing features. He had on a blue face mask that covered up to the bridge of his nose, and his forehead protector covered one eye. His silvery gray hair shot up, as if defying gravity, and his one visible eye seemed to exude laziness. Or at least it would have, if he wasn't getting punched in the face. Their sensei, as he later realized. Though he did have to admit, using Kawarimi to escape Sakura's wrath was ingenious. Sasuke was just glad that he hadn't been the target of it. After that, during their introductions, he was treated to even more surprises as to Naruto's change. He had completely lost any of his high-strung, hyperactive tendencies. He was more like Shikamaru than anything else. Instead of sitting there like a coiled spring on a hair trigger like anyone who knew him would think he would, he simply lay down like he was trying to take a nap. Then, he had provided his own introduction. Instead of screaming out his name, how he was obsessed with Sakura and ramen and his idiotic dream of becoming Hokage, Naruto simply spoke in a lazy, uncaring tone. He found Sakura annoying, something Sasuke could agree fully on. He seemed to almost hate most of the village, and counted only a few people as even his friends. At least he still seemed to like ramen. His dream, on the other hand, Sasuke had long since ceased his futile attempts to deduce what the hell Naruto had meant by melon. It was obvious it was something only Naruto understood, or it didn't mean anything at all and the dobe was just being stupid. Then, their genin test came. That was the thing that had Sasuke up nearly all last night pondering. He had been trying to deduce one simple question. How had Naruto, the dobe, the dead last, gotten so powerful? It had defied everything Sasuke knew. When Naruto had first started to throw the kunai, Sasuke had almost welcomed the feeling of exasperation. Charging in recklessly without thinking was something the Naruto they knew had always done. But when Kakashi had turned the attack completely on its head and tried to scold the blonde, Sasuke and Sakura had been in for the shock of their lives. Naruto had used the attack as bait to lure Kakashi to him where he had a clone waiting, a maneuver that, though he'd never admitted, Sasuke knew even he would never have come up with, especially so quickly. And where, and how, had Naruto learned to make solid clones? After the test had started and Kakashi had disappeared, Sasuke had spent nearly an hour searching for the man. He had briefly considered asking Naruto to help, seeing as he'd much rather have a competent shinobi like the blonde than one of his rabid fangirls as a teammate, but he had quickly crushed that idea. After all, what good were teammates in the long run anyway? And besides, if the dead last could do that well against Kakashi, then he should have no trouble against their would-be sensei. Sasuke soon lived to regret those words. Kakashi had, in all seriousness, made mincemeat out of him. He had used every weapon in his arsenal, even his Gukaku and a well-concealed trap. But Kakashi had easily brushed him off like he was an annoying fly, leaving him buried up to his head in the ground. Then Naruto had surprised him again. Not only had the blonde dug him out, He had figured out the true part of the test when Sasuke had fallen for Kakashi's ploy hook, line and sinker. And the fact that he wasn't even talking to the real Naruto. In fact, as he later realized, he hadn't seen the real Naruto all day, just clones. Then there was the perfectly coordinated assault Naruto and his clones had set up, and included himself and Sakura into. And Sasuke was still pondering, among other things, when and how Naruto had even gotten the bells off of Kakashi. He had never seen them grabbed by Naruto or one of his clones. Clones, throughout the academy, out of the 3 jutsus necessary for passing, the Bunshin Jutsu was the one that had been impossible for Naruto to accomplish. And yet, here he was, a genin, even though he had failed the graduation test, with a solid Bunshin Jutsu, even though such things should have been impossible for him, and did not seem brash, idiotic or loud at all. What had happened to him? As he stared down at the clear blue steam below him, Sasuke's face contorted into a scowl. He obviously couldn't deduce what had happened to the blonde, and it had been impossible to find the boy yesterday. And today, Sasuke was beginning to wonder whether the blonde was even going to show up. So far, it had been 2 hours and they had seen neither hide nor hair of their sensei or teammate. It was enough to make Sasuke wonder if their lazy sensei had somehow rubbed off on the blonde in the extremely short time they had known each other. Sasuke was broken from his brooding as he heard the sound of rushing air that signified a shunshin. Apparently, Sakura heard it too, and they both turned to the sound expecting their sensei. Hey. I bet the Dobi overslept or something, Sasuke thought with a self-satisfied grin as he looked to his new sensei. His train of mocking thought was quickly derailed as he saw who it was. Balancing on one of the poles at the bridge's edge, while giving small wave of greeting, was Naruto. Yo. He said in a lazy tone, his expression lazy and uncaring, think L's usual expression. Sasuke's eyes widened slightly. He was expecting Kakashi so much that the shock of seeing Naruto was far greater than it should have been. You're late. Sakura screamed at the top of her lungs in her usual fashion, her fist beginning to shake as she considered pummeling the blonde. Naruto seemed unfazed by this display, only flinching slightly in pain while rubbing his left ear. Geez. Do you have to be so loud? Some of us have sensitive ears, you know. He spoke in the same lazy tone that eerily reminded Sasuke of Shikamaru. And I don't see Kakashi-sensei here, so I'd say I'm not late. You're just early. You're still late from the time, he said. You oversleep, Dobi? Sasuke said in his usual mocking tone. At least he could return some form of normalcy. Naruto had never been able to resist his taunts. Not really. I woke up around 8 o'clock, and besides, if he was 3 hours late yesterday and the day before, I'd say chances are he's going to be late a third day, and it looks like I was right. Why should I be waiting here for 3 hours if I know he's not going to be showing up until 11 o'clock? I could get another hour of sleep or some morning training in or whatever. If you ask me, you're the stupid ones. I mean, if he was 3 hours late the first and second time, chances are he's going to be 3 hours late the third time, Naruto said as he gracefully jumped to the ground, his hands in his pockets, and leaned against the post, his eyes closed in some attempt to sleep. Having no counter to that, Sasuke merely returned to staring down at the water and brooding like the emo he was. Sakura meanwhile, simply went back to staring dreamily at him and imagining things that neither of the two others wanted to think about. Sasuke wasn't sure how much time had passed when the peaceful silence around them was broken, though in a rather subtle manner. It sounded almost like a low chant. Turning his head towards the source, Sasuke's eyes widened slightly. Apparently, Naruto had decided to pass the time today by trying to sing, of all things, and quite frankly, it was a little creepy to Sasuke. It wasn't really singing, it was more like a very low chant. There weren't even words to it. Naruto was simply chanting a collection of O's at different lengths and tempos. But what really creeped Sasuke and Sakura out was how Naruto seemed to be able to make his voice reverberate and far deeper than they would have expected possible for someone like him. It was then that something dawned on Sasuke. Hey Dobi, how did you learn Shunshin? His tone was mocking and didn't hold much curiosity. It wasn't like he was curious to learn it for himself. The way he asked it, it was more like he wanted to know how Naruto had the competence to learn the jutsu, which was exactly what he was wondering. It actually took a few seconds before Naruto stopped the chanting and seemed to actually realize that Sasuke had just asked him something. It was in a scroll I found, Naruto answered. And it was true, technically. He had simply found the forbidden scroll in the old man's vault. Teach it to me. Naruto raised an eyebrow in curiosity. Sasuke, the so-called Rookie of the Year and the Academy's resident egomaniac, was asking him, the dead last, for help. Naruto restrained the urge to smirk, and deep inside his mind, Antheros and Zex did smirk. Well, Zex smirked. Antheros made something more like a psychotic grin. It was time for that lesson in humility. Oh, why are you asking me? I thought I was the dead last. Shouldn't you be above asking me for help? This time, Naruto couldn't resist the small, satisfied smirk that spread across his face when Sasuke's eyes widened as tried to process that information. However, Sakura seemed ever eager to help boost the Uchiha's already overinflated ego. Yeah, he is above asking you for help. That's why you should be so thankful that he is. She yelled at Naruto, who was flinching in the slight pain her voice dealt to his eardrums, but he soon found a way to shut her up. Quickly pointing to Sakura, he spoke. You. Shut up. I'm pwning him with logic. You'll get your turn. This had the desired effect of immediately shut Sakura up in a combination of shock that he had just insulted her, the fact that he seemed to be doing that a lot lately not yet occurring to her, and her attempts to process what he meant by that statement. By this time, however, Sasuke had managed to regain his superiority complex and was seemingly unaware of what Naruto had just told his fangirl. Yeah, so what's your point? Teach it to me, he said, his voice raising in volume. Naruto was tempted to keep leading the Uchiha in circles of his own self-contradicting logic, but it was time to work on deflating that ego of his. No, Naruto said, his tone telling that there was no room for argument. But Sasuke wasn't going to listen to that. What? Why not? He almost yelled this time. Maybe it was the fact that he expected Naruto to just blindly agree like almost anyone else in the village would. But Naruto wasn't most people in the village. For 3 reasons, the blonde said as he held up one finger. 1. It would only serve to further inflate your ego, which is about the size of Kumo by the way. 2. You didn't ask nicely. And 3. I don't like you. Needless to say, Sasuke was not happy. What? Why should that matter? I am. Yes, I know, you're the genius Uchiha, Naruto interrupted, speaking in a sarcastic tone. Now explain to me why that's a good reason why I should just give you whatever you want. Oh wait. That's why the entire village has been giving you anything you like for the past 5 years. Well, get this through that oversized head of yours, Uchiha. I am not most of the village. In fact, the very fact that most of the village has been practically bowing at your feet is enough justification for me to not teach you anything. Naruto finished his brief rant and exhaled, waiting for Sasuke's reply. Said Uchiha looked quite angry at this moment, as well as his fangirl. Baka! Sakura screamed. How dare you speak to Sasuke-kun like that? He could beat you into a pulp in no time flat. He's an Uchiha. He's better than you? Oh? Naruto asked, a look of amused curiosity on his face, and just where is his almighty Uchiha clan that he thinks gives him such greatness? I don't see a clan. In fact, I don't remember any such clan since 5 years ago. As far as I'm concerned, Sasuke, you have no clan. You're just an egotistical boy with a bloodline. A bloodline, I might add, that you haven't even awakened. If the symbol of the Uchiha's power is this almighty Sharingan of theirs, where is yours? If you don't have it, I don't see how you're any different from anyone else in our class. Sasuke was now fighting the temptation to pound the insolent Dobi into the ground for his remarks, but even he had to admit, Naruto was right on all of his points. The Uchiha clan was all but destroyed, and besides, how was he an Uchiha if he didn't have his Sharingan yet? But Naruto was still wrong on one point. You're forgetting something, Dobi. He sneered, I'm the Rookie of the Year. A ninja genius. The grades of the academy prove that. And what right do you have to speak? You're the dead last. Naruto's eyebrows rose slightly, and Sasuke thought he finally got the Dobi on something. But then Naruto simply closed his eyes and shook his head almost in sympathy. Sasuke. He began, you're no genius. What? How can you say that? I'm the Rookie of the Year, you dead last? That doesn't prove anything. That just says that you did better than everyone else in that class. It doesn't say anything about whether or not you're a genius. A genius is one who strives beyond what is expected. A genius isn't the one who ran the fastest in the race, he's the one who found the shortcut. Geniuses think in a different way than the norm. They naturally have more potential than those around them. You, on the other hand, have only been working harder than the rest of us. For the past 5 years, you have been training almost relentlessly, you have been training harder than anyone else in our class. That is why you got Rookie of the Year. It is hardly a detriment. In fact, I respect you highly for taking the career of being a ninja so seriously. It has allowed you to become very skilled and will make you a powerful and skilled shinobi. But you're no genius. There is a difference between being skilled and being a genius. Don't confuse them. Sasuke and Sakura were now stunned, their mouths hanging open. The former was far more shocked than the latter, however. Sasuke was still trying to get a grip on what Naruto had said. But then a new thought came to his head. That doesn't change the fact that I'm better than you. I'm still the Rookie of the Year, and you're the dead last of our class, he said in a mocking and confident tone. Naruto just smirked. That could be argued. I'm not the one who got his ass handed to him by Kakashi-sensei yesterday. Sasuke's eyes narrowed further as he spoke again. Fight me then, regardless of anything. He was still better than the Dobi. And how dare he insinuate that he wasn't a genius? A dark grin spread across Naruto's face as he replied. All right. But no ninjutsu. I can't use my clones, and you can't use your fireballs, agreed? Fine. I won't need them to beat you, and he wouldn't. It was common knowledge at the academy that Naruto's taijutsu sucked. Naruto chuckled as he stood up straight and walked to the end of the bridge, so he was directly facing Sasuke, who stood at the other end, already in his taijutsu stance. Sasuke raised an eyebrow as he did. Was it his imagination, or was Naruto slightly taller than he was yesterday? Don't judge a book by its cover. Its pages might just eat you, he said as he assumed an odd pose. His left hand was coiled into a fist, but he brought his arm around behind him so it was on his lower back. His right hand was open with his arm extended out. The upper arm was held at his side with the forearm extended forward at an upward angle. Finally, his palm was open and facing upwards. Sakura immediately moved out of the way, a giddy look on her face. Naruto had a feeling she didn't have much confidence in him. Sasuke was slightly puzzled. He had never seen that kind of stance before. Had the blonde discovered a new one? It didn't matter though. If Naruto couldn't master the academy taijutsu, how could he hope to learn a more advanced style? Naruto let out a slight sigh as he calmed himself. He would need all his concentration for this. Zex and Varsi were the keys to this style. His mind completely calm, Naruto opened his eyes, the eyes of Zex, and spoke in his monotonous voice. Come then. Show me your strength. Sasuke didn't seem to need any prompting. He instantly charged Naruto, his left hand throwing a powerful strike to his face. Naruto, however, immediately tilted his head to the left, dodging the punch. The blonde then followed up by knocking Sasuke's arm away with his extended arm. Sasuke quickly retaliated by throwing a quick jab with his right hand, only for it to be intercepted by Naruto's other hand grabbing his wrist. Naruto quickly followed through by gripping Sasuke's left arm with his right hand and pulled Sasuke off balance, moving past the boy with his foot outstretched at the same time. The result was Sasuke tripping over Naruto's foot and being thrown to the ground behind him. Scowling, Sasuke was instantly back on his feet, and was on Naruto again, raining down a hail of punches and strikes. Naruto, however, skillfully dodged or stepped out of range. Sasuke was quickly losing his cool. How could this be happening? He had the best taijutsu in the class, and yet he hadn't managed to land a single blow on the blonde. The strikes that did actually impact Naruto were quickly blocked and countered. He just couldn't fathom how this could be happening. How did the Dobi get this good? It was like he could see his moves before they happened, and was he imagining things, or had Naruto's pupils elongated into slits? Damn it! Sasuke cursed as he leapt forward, throwing another full-force punch at the blonde's chest, hoping to catch him off guard. But his opponent had seen straight through his ploy. Bringing up his hand, Naruto caught Sasuke's oncoming fist and quickly pushed it downward, sending Sasuke flying over him. The Uchiha was quick to recover, however. Landing on his hands, Sasuke sent a spinning kick at Naruto's head. But the blonde saw through that feint as well. Thinking quickly, Naruto not only ducked under the kick, but also caught Sasuke's ankle, leaving the boy helpless. You have become strong, Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto spoke in a calm, even tone, that had an almost sage-like sound to it, though. Naruto stopped as he twisted Sasuke's foot, sending the boy tumbling. But even then, Sasuke lashed out with his other foot, hoping that the blonde would be too distracted. He had no such luck. Naruto leapt up out of the path of Sasuke's attack, flipping end over end until he landed on one of the posts at the end of the bridge, gazing down at Sakura and the prone Sasuke with uncaring indifference. Much to learn, you still have, he finished, assuming his starting pose. Naruto could only inwardly smirk as he looked at Sasuke's scowling face. This was why Sasuke was no genius. He thought in a far too linear fashion. He didn't think with strategy. He just rushed in and used brute force. This was why he had almost failed Kakashi-sensei's test. He, on the other hand, had quickly found a way to exploit this weakness in Sasuke, as well as capitalizing on his own greatest strength. His nigh infinite stamina. Over the past week, during his training with his clones, he had soon learned that he had hardly any aptitude when it came to taijutsu. He simply could not grasp the academy style that he had been taught. So he had come up with a rather effective solution. He had made his own taijutsu style. He was still unsure of what to call it, but its effectiveness was quickly apparent. The style capitalized on his strengths and eliminated his weaknesses. The concept behind the style was pure defense. The entire style revolved around blocking, evasion and counterattacks. Naruto had designed the style not as a taijutsu, but rather as a counter to taijutsu. The idea of the style being to use his incredible stamina to turn a battle into a war of attrition. He would simply wear his opponents down before going for a kill. The style's main strength was the way Naruto would concentrate on only his opponent's movements and defending against them. Without being distracted by his own offensive, his defense was made far stronger. Of course, the style was completely ineffective against anything but taijutsu, but then since Naruto didn't like fighting with taijutsu anyway, that wasn't really an issue. The only real weakness of the style was if someone happened to be faster or stronger than Naruto himself was. But yesterday's augmentations Kyuubi's Yuki had given his senses and muscles had given him the perfect edge over Sasuke. Naruto was broken from his musings as Sasuke leapt up to attack him again. Regaining his senses, Naruto leapt off the post, landing on the ground at the end of the bridge, a now enraged Sasuke glaring at him from atop the post. Geez. He looks like he's gonna blow a gasket. What Sasuke did next, Naruto could admit he wasn't expecting. Well, he was expecting it, he just didn't think Sasuke would actually go that far. Said Uchiha leapt high into the air. Naruto tensed, wondering what the Uchiha was planning. Then, Sasuke started making hand seals. Naruto's eye widened as he realized what Sasuke was doing. So much so that he didn't move until Sasuke finished. Gokakyu no Jutsu. Sasuke practically screamed in anger as he let loose the giant fireball at Naruto. Naruto's look of disbelief quickly hardened into a scowl. Dumbass. Naruto yelled, mostly to himself actually, as he pulled a kunai from one of the pouches on his leg. With a flick of his wrist, he sent the knife flying directly into the oncoming fireball. On its other side, Sasuke was still unaware of what Naruto was doing, too consumed by his own hate to think clearly. Then the kunai exploded. As the weapon penetrated the fireball, it detonated with tremendous force. The ensuing shockwave completely extinguishing the attack. Knocked back to his senses. Sasuke's eyes widened in fear as he brought his arms up in an attempt to shield himself as the shockwave and flames impacted him, sending him flying. Sasuke-kun. Sakura screamed in terror as the battered form of the Uchiha flew over her and hit the concrete on the other side of the bridge, hard. Running to her longtime crush, Sakura tried to help him up, only to be turned away. Sasuke was now struggling to even stand up. His whole body ached from the shockwave and he began to wonder if he had broken something in that fall. Those thoughts were broken as he heard the heavy footfalls land on the wooden planks of the bridge. As he looked up, Sakura followed his gaze. Naruto was now calmly striding across the bridge at a calm and even pace. His expression was of complete neutrality. His eyes were closed and his lips were completely straight as he approached them. When he stepped off the bridge, Sakura was quick to accost him. "You baka! What were you thinking? You could have killed Sasuke-kun!" She screamed at the top of her lungs as she stood in front of him, her fist raised, fully intent on pummeling him as she had done so often at the academy. But that had been the old Naruto. Quicker than she could even register, Naruto seized the oncoming fist in an iron-hard grip. Sakura's eyes widened at this, but that was nothing compared to what happened when Naruto's eyes shot open, affixing her with a dark glare. "Do not interfere." His voice was completely monotonous, but also held an underlying anger to it. Anger that was being kept in perfect check, and his eyes held an even darker look. A look of pure and utter darkness, like she was nothing but an annoyance. An annoyance that he could obliterate with no more than a flick of his wrist. Obviously, his current anger was directed at Sasuke, but Sakura feared that he might turn his unholy anger on her, and for the first time, Sakura feared for her life. She now knew for certain that this was in no way the Naruto she knew. This new Naruto held nothing but contempt for her. But even now, she just couldn't accept that fact. Naruto had changed so much, so fast, that it was nigh impossible for her to adapt. Then, Naruto released her, tossing her aside. Sakura was so absorbed in fear of that glare Naruto had given her that she almost fell over. Not giving the girl a second thought, Naruto stepped in front of Sasuke as the latter tried to stand. Naruto quickly affixed Sasuke with the same dark glare he had given Sakura as he spoke in the same neutral voice, though with a bit more emotion and volume this time. "You dumbass. You almost killed me just now," he said, his voice beginning to raise in volume. "Whatever," Sasuke said, trying to salvage what he could of his already splintered pride, "you still lost, Dobi." "Lost?" Naruto asked incredulously. "Huh? I'm not the one barely able to stand?" Growling, Sasuke finally got to his feet. "I'll show you who's barely able to stand," he yelled as he began to charge Naruto. But just as he did, he felt a strong hand grip his shoulder. Looking behind him, Sasuke could see the form of their sensei towering over him. "That's enough." Naruto gazed at his sensei and currently restrained teammate, a look of uncaring indifference on his face. A seething Sasuke was now being grappled easily by Kakashi, the orange book missing from his hands. The hand that the boy was about to use to strike Naruto was now pinned behind his back to paralyze him. "That's enough." The man spoke in a low voice, not the lazy, uncaring tone from yesterday, but one that demanded attention, and seemed to carry an underlying hint of disappointment. Naruto could instantly tell what that stemmed from. He supposed he'd be in a similar state if he was in Kakashi's position. "Kakashi-sensei!" Sakura yelled as she saw him. "Where the hell were you? Naruto Baka almost killed Sasuke-kun?" Sakura was cut off from her ranting as she immediately found herself gripped by what could only be described as concentrated fear. As Kakashi's single eye gripped her in a piercing gaze, Sakura found it impossible to move, even difficult to breathe. It was much like the terrifying gaze that Naruto had affixed her with only minutes before, only this was far worse. When she had met Naruto's piercing and haunting gaze, it was like she was being stripped bare. Like every secret she ever held or will be holding was completely and utterly brought to light without any personal preference. Like everything about her was being taken apart and examined like some scientific specimen. But more than that, it had been not just the fact that she felt so examined. It was that she felt so utterly powerless. Like every defense, both mental and physical that she ever had was torn down and she was at the complete mercy of the blonde. What Sakura was feeling now was far worse. What Kakashi was directing at her now could only be described as pure, concentrated, unadulterated fear. It felt as if a knife was being pressed to her throat, as if he could end her life with a single thought. It was terrifying to say the least. And then, just as quickly as it came, the aura of fear vanished. Like a morning mist in the heat of the day. Kakashi was still affixing her with his dark, cyclopedian gaze, but it held none of the fear from before, like the oppressive aura had been simply turned off like one would do to a light switch. Sakura was suddenly struck by a flash of inspiration, a memory of a lesson Ruka had given them a year back. Killing intent, now it made sense. What Naruto and now Kakashi had hit her with was their own respective killing intent, or ki as the abbreviation was. But what truly shocked Sakura was not Kakashi's, he was a Junin after all, and she was just a lowly genin just out of the academy. No, what truly amazed and even terrified Sakura was that Naruto, someone who should have been below even her skill level, could have induced a similar effect. Granted, Naruto's wasn't as terrifying or fear-inducing as Kakashi's had been. In fact, That was what scared Sakura the most. It was that it hadn't been as bad. The raw power behind Naruto's ki-induced glare had been nowhere near as strong as Kakashi's. And yet, the effects they had on her were almost identical. Naruto's ki had paralyzed her in fear just as much as Kakashi's had, and with probably a tenth of the power. Just what was so special about Naruto? Was it because his ki, or his chakra for that matter, was different than others? Was it some kind of special talent or bloodline? Or is it just a sign of how weak I am? Sakura thought to herself as she recalled the feeling of complete and utter inferiority she had felt yesterday. At the sight of seeing the incredible power Naruto possessed. How he seemed to be surpassing all of them, even Sasuke now that she had seen them fight. Naruto simply seemed to be on a higher level. Sakura's eyes suddenly widened as she recalled his words from before. A genius isn't the one who ran the fastest in the race, he's the one who found the shortcut. They naturally have more potential than those around them. There is a difference between being skilled and being a genius, don't confuse them. Naruto had said those words to teach Sasuke a lesson. A lesson in humility. But maybe it had a deeper meaning as well. Was he referring to himself? Does he think that he's a genius? Sakura wondered. Sakura, Kakashi spoke, breaking the girl from her ponderings. It was a voice that was a bit less dark and foreboding than before, but still held the undeniable authority. I will not have your infatuation with Sasuke overriding your simple logic. I watched the battle from beginning to end. Sasuke is the one who struck first. It was only natural for Naruto to retaliate. Sakura could only nod in agreement. No matter how much she wanted to think that Sasuke was in the right, she just couldn't deny that logic. Though at the same time Kakashi continued, looking to the blonde who now looked on in curiosity as to what his sensei was about to say. I believe you overreacted. You could have handled the situation better than hurling an exploding kunai into the fireball. Sasuke could have been seriously injured had you not timed the note right. The thoughts that now it seemed that Sasuke was now in the right and Naruto in the wrong immediately broke her from her internal thoughts and set her back into her admiration and infatuation with the young Uchiha. Yeah. You could have killed him, Baka, she yelled, not noticing the disappointed look Kakashi gave her. Naruto's eyes widened slightly, but he then simply shook his head. Sakura, if I had actually wanted to kill Sasuke, believe me, he'd be nothing more than an ugly stain on the landscape right now. And Kakashi-sensei, Sasuke was never in any danger of injury. I had everything under control. Kakashi's eyes narrowed slightly at this as the Junin responded. Maybe in your own mind, but there are plenty of other variables in the real world that you can't account for. What if the exploding tag you used had been faulty and burned slower than normal? What if it was more powerful than you anticipated? Sasuke could have been seriously injured, he spoke in a scolding tone. You're absolutely right, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto agreed, his head nodding, which is precisely the reason why I didn't use an exploding tag. This immediately knocked everyone into a shocked stupor that seemed to be becoming a common occurrence around Naruto recently. Sasuke might have even been able to break Kakashi's hold had he not been in a similar state of surprise. An amused grin spread across Naruto's face as he reached into one of the pouches on his thighs. Pulling out what appeared to be a normal, nondescript kunai, Naruto held it up in front of him for the rest to see. I don't use very many normal kunai or shuriken anymore. I found these to be far more versatile. Huh? Was all Sakura could reply, that's just a normal kunai? Wrong, Naruto corrected, his smirk widening. After all, he continued as he dropped the knife. Just as the weapon was about to hit the ground, however, it was suddenly engulfed in smoke. Kage Bunshin have so many uses, Naruto finished as the smoke cleared to reveal a second Naruto standing next in the place of the kunai. You use Henged Kage Bunshin? Kakashi asked in disbelief. Why not? Naruto asked in mock surprise. I mean, they can do almost anything. This way I can get any weapon I might need at a moment's notice. Besides, how many people are going to expect a kunai or shuriken randomly explode or turn into a clone? While Sakura and Sasuke were looking on in shock, Kakashi also had a look of amazement and pride as well. Naruto truly had taken the technique to its ultimate level. He had heard of people henging their Kage Bunshin so they could sneak into places, but Naruto had taken it a step further. Combined with the sheer number of clones that he could create, in Naruto's hands, the potential of Kage Bunshin was nigh limitless. Naruto could only smirk at their shocked expressions as he continued. And the best part is that I can just make a group of these guys and store them ahead of time, he said, gesturing to the clone who just smiled and waved at the others. Hi. That way my chakra isn't depleted and I have that much more to use in battle. If I happen to need a few clones, I can just toss a few weapons and I've got some backup with no chakra depletion. Naruto finished as he looked on at his teammates who only just seemed to be coming out their shocked stupor, something that seemed to be happening frequently around him. His clones, however, quickly put them back in one. I like pancakes. While Sasuke, Sakura and Kakashi were now looking at the clone with a general, WTF expression, Naruto just glanced to his companion before assuming a thoughtful look. Indeed. They're good. Maybe we'll go get some later. Yay. The clone cheered before poofing back into a kunai, which Naruto retrieved and returned to the pouch on his leg. So, you were saying, Sensei? Naruto asked, turning back to Kakashi who had now released Sasuke. Alright. I guess you did have things under control. But even so, you both went overboard with that. Naruto, even if you didn't intend to injure Sasuke and most likely wouldn't have, you still used a powerful and highly dangerous technique. Bunshin Daibakuha is not a skill to be used so flippantly. And Sasuke. Kakashi now turned to Sasuke, who had been smirking spitefully at seeing the blonde being admonished. What you did could be considered assault. You and Naruto both agreed not to use ninjutsu in your fight, and you used a very dangerous and potentially deadly technique on him. If Naruto hadn't been careful or prepared, he could have been seriously injured or killed. I am in no way against sparring, but I will not have my students trying to kill each other. Sasuke's eyes were now wide in shock at the forcefulness of his teacher's statement, and even took a slight step back from the man. Kakashi seemed to not even notice this as he continued. If I ever see you, any of you, he spoke as he glanced towards Naruto and Sakura, using techniques on each other that could seriously injure or kill each other without my approval, I am dropping you from the program and sending you back to the academy. Is that clear? He finished, applying a slight amount of key to his voice to make his point, leaving his students in states of varying amounts of shock and unease. Yes, sir. Naruto spoke, his expression and voice conveying that he understood perfectly and would do his utmost to follow the orders his teacher had given him. Sakura was the next to recover, nodding vigorously in agreement to Naruto's statement. Yes, sensei. We'll do that. Sasuke just sighed as he seemed to accept defeat. Yes, sensei. Kakashi seemed to accept this and nodded. All right. Now that that's out of the way, time for what we were supposed to be doing, he said, reverting back to his normal, lazy tone almost instantaneously. Pulling the familiar orange book from his ninja pouch, Kakashi began walking off, motioning for his students to follow. Today, we officially start missions as Team 7. We'll get our missions from Hokage-sama at the tower, so we'll be off there now. Naruto simply shook his head as Sasuke's and Sakura's faces lit up in surprise and anticipation. The fact that this was what they were doing was quite obvious. Naruto had been guessing it even before Kakashi had told him yesterday, though he was a bit curious as to what exactly they'd be doing. From what he, or rather the 100 or so Kage Bunshin he'd scattered around Konoha listening to whatever people may have been talking about, had heard, they'd only be doing low-grade D-rank missions. Nothing too big like escorts or assassinations. Heck, they most likely wouldn't even be leaving the village. But at least he knew they'd be pretty easy, and they'd be getting paid too, which was always good. Naruto's attention was then turned to a soft giggling coming from Kakashi. Glancing up at his sensei, the blonde noticed he seemed quite into that orange book of his. This in of itself made Naruto curious. Just what was in that book that his sensei found so interesting? Focusing chakra to his eyes, Naruto's vision magnified by a few degrees, one of the bonuses from the influx of Kyuubi's Yuki he'd gotten yesterday. With his enhanced vision, Naruto examined the title of the book. A bit of a chore considering that he was doing this from partially behind the man and out of the corner of his eye as to not attract attention, but he managed. Icha Icha Paradise? Wait, isn't that? Naruto's eyes widened slightly before adopting something of a WTF. Look. Kakashi, supposedly one of the strongest ninja in the village from what he'd heard, spent most of his free time reading porn. Okay, this guy has issues, Zenos said, voicing Naruto's thoughts. Ya got that right, Antheros agreed, shaking his head in semi-disbelief. Zex seemed to be in a much lesser state of surprise. Meh. So he reads porn. Plenty of people do. Yeah, but out in public? Naruto put in. Hey, porn rhymes with corn, Drax said out of the blue, something everyone else just seemed to tune out. Where do cats come from? From your mom? Really? She must really like cats. Do any of you really think he should be reading that stuff in public? I mean, there are impressionable children around? Varsi spoke up. Ha! I bet they don't even know what that is. Naruto himself adopted a thoughtful expression as the pyro's statement sank in. That's an idea, huh? Oh, I see where you're going. Hee. Antheros chuckled to himself as he caught on. What is it? Xenos inquired. You'll see, Antheros replied, his face bearing an evil, knowing smirk as Naruto enacted their evil plan. Hey, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked as the 3 genin and 1 junin walked through Konoha. Do you really think it's such a good idea to read stuff like that in front of impressionable children such as ourselves? Kakashi's eyebrows rose slightly, but quickly suppressed it. He was about to counter with his own argument when Sakura spoke up. What are you talking about? Sakura asked, suddenly curious herself as to what the book was that her sensei found so interesting. What is that book anyway? And though he did his best not to show it, Sasuke was equally interested and looked slightly towards his sensei, silently awaiting an answer. Well, Kakashi stammered slightly, not exactly sure how to proceed with the situation. None of the teams he had taken in the past had asked him about that before their test, and he had failed every single one of them, save this one. So he was unsure how to broach the fact that he was an avid porn reader to 12-year-old children. Granted, they were shinobi, but that didn't have any effect on their inherent naivete and closed-mindedness to such things. You see, it's porn. Sasuke and Sakura were now looking at their blonde teammate with semi-shocked expressions. Said blonde was returning their gaze with an evil, victorious smirk. Priceless. The 2 flabbergasted genin slowly looked to their sensei for some sort of confirmation of this. Sakura now stammered, her face a combination of shock and growing disgust. But before her sensei could say anything in his defense, her blonde teammate continued. Oh yeah. It's called Icha Icha Paradise. You ever heard of it? Well, apparently, it's one of the best-selling adult book series in the elemental countries right now. And from what I've heard, he's quite the avid reader. And yes, it is porn. Naruto spoke up, an innocent look on his face, with an undertone of an evil, triumphant smirk as seeing his teammates apparently scarred for life and his sensei seriously unsettled. So sensei, I don't think you ever answered my question, did you? That had been an interesting trip to the Hokage Tower, Naruto decided. After Kakashi's attempt, emphasis on the attempt part, to explain himself and his porn addiction, with several additions, from himself of course, his teammates were now thoroughly scarred for life and had a much lower opinion of their sensei. Sakura in particular looked like she wanted to rip the book apart, had it not been for the fact that had she done that, Kakashi would probably have proceeded to rip her apart. Naruto had long since known that Sakura had held a stereotypical female hatred of pornography, something he had found quite ironic considering the fact that one of her lifelong fantasies was to more or less reenact the content of that book with Sasuke. Sigh, hypocritical as always. What I ever saw in her I will probably never know. This was precisely the reason, or one of them anyway, that Naruto had cast off any kind of affections or feelings he might have held for Sakura or any like her. And besides, Naruto had no interest in girls anything like Sakura. They had the pathetic fantasy of playing the damsel in distress, not doing anything while the object of their affection heroically rescued them from danger. Something that absolutely disgusted Naruto. Such things were the ultimate personification of sexism and self-degradation. They actually believed that they should leave all the work to their love interest. That they were inherently incapable of doing anything themselves. It was even worse than Hinata's self-doubt and shyness. If there was anything that Naruto would want from a girlfriend, it would be not to blindly follow him like Sakura and others would to their Sasuke-kun. Instead, he would want them to walk beside him, as an equal, not as a follower. And it was not just a personal preference of his. Naruto believed that this is the way so-called love should work. As he had read in a book a few days ago, to truly love another is not to gaze at them, but gaze forward with them. It was because of this that Naruto found Sakura and all members of Sasuke's fan club to be utterly pathetic. One might think Naruto was being picky, but then, he was talking about a love interest here. Not something to be taken so lightly in his opinion. Though Naruto found it interesting that not many girls he knew fit that category. Heck, Hinata-chan's the only one who even comes close to fitting it. Actually, she fits it rather well. Wait, Hinata-chan? Where did that come from? Naruto was broken from his musings as he realized that they had not only entered the Hokage Tower, but they were now walking through the door to the mission room. At the end of the room sat the Hokage as well as a few Chunin, one of whom happened to be Iruka. Genin Team 7, under Kakashi Hitaki, reporting for missions, Kakashi announced, albeit in his normal lazy tone. Though Sarutobi had seen the four of them come in, Iruka and the other Chunin had been absorbed in paperwork and now just looked up to see the latest arrivals. Though most of them regarded them with general indifference. A few not even recognizing Naruto in his new attire. Iruka smiled warmly at his former students, especially the one who was much like a little brother to him, even after his personality shift. Chuckling at Kakashi's faux professional tone, the Sandaime retrieved a few papers from the desk. Well then, most of the D-rank missions have already been taken for today. All we have left are these three, he said as he placed the papers on the desk. Kakashi walked forward and retrieved them. At first he was going to simply look over them himself, as was his habit. But then he remembered that he was a teacher here, not a team leader. So he supposed that it should be his genin that decided their mission and handed the papers to Naruto, who immediately started looking them over with a critical eye, Sasuke and Sakura looking over his shoulders. Smiling softly at Kakashi's actions, Sarutobi launched into an explanation. The only missions left for today are a delivery mission, a retrieval mission and a work assistance mission, he explained. Sasuke and Sakura looked up in curiosity. Those missions certainly sounded interesting. But what does manual assistance mean? Sakura wondered. Naruto on the other hand simply looked up with a semi-incredulous look. So we're either playing a cheap delivery service, a city-wide game of hide and seek, or a day of hard manual labor. Geez, they all sound so fun and exciting, he said with a voice that dripped sarcasm. His teammates looked to him with questioning looks, which were ignored. Sarutobi simply shook his head in a cross between amusement and faux exasperation. Yes, those are your choices. This is only your first mission, so we can't very well give you anything above a D rank. At least not until you complete enough for your sensei to satisfy that you're ready. Iruka answered while gesturing to Kakashi, a small amused grin on his face at Naruto's apparent sarcasm. And it wasn't like he couldn't relate. He, like all of their shinobi, had been forced to endure the D rank phase of his shinobi career, and had been all too glad when he started undertaking C ranks and higher. Naruto himself adopted a semi-thoughtful look at Iruka's statement before squashing it. Guess there's no chance you think we're ready for a C rank, is there? He spoke as he glanced to Kakashi, who was now leaning against the back wall. Nope, damn it. Think of it this way, Naruto. At least you're getting paid, the Sandaime spoke up, gambling he understood Naruto's new persona as well as he thought. Money? Naruto said to himself. Okay, you got a point there. Turning around to face his teammates, he spoke in his normal neutral tone with a hint of sarcasm. So what do you two want? A day of being a cheap delivery service, a city-wide game of hide and seek, or a day of back-breaking hard labor? Personally, I'd take the second one. Caught off guard a little, Sasuke and Sakura took a second to digest what Naruto just said. Well, the second does sound like the easiest. Sakura trailed off, not exactly interested in a day of hard work or running all around the village carrying packages or whatever. Fine. We'll take it, Sasuke said, not feeling happy at how Naruto seemed to be asserting leadership of their team. All right then, Naruto agreed, a small smile on his face as he turned back around, returning the other papers to the desk while looking over the third set. His face suddenly turned to one of semi-confusion and curiosity. Retrieving a lost cat? He asked Sarutobi, an eyebrow raised. Yes, the cat's name is Tora. She's the pet of the wife of the Fire Daimyo. The aged Hokage answered, pulling a picture from the desk and handed it to Naruto. The picture showed a small black cat with a small red ribbon around its neck. She is apparently extremely fond of the cat. But for some reason, it seems that it has run away, again, and she's contracted us to retrieve it. Really? Naruto replied as Kakashi took the papers to sign. The forms were soon filled out and Kakashi led the team to the door. The picture was still in Naruto's hands, having just shown it to his teammates. I doubt we'll have much trouble, the blonde spoke up. I wouldn't be so confident, Naruto. Iruka warned. Most of the genin who have taken this mission have been frustrated with it to no end. I think a few of them have actually tried to kill the thing. He finished, the slight hint of malice in his voice betraying the fact that he had had personal experience with what he was talking about. Naruto, though, simply formed a confident grin on his face. Well, I'm not most genin, he retorted as Team 7 left the room. Walking down the stairs towards the exit, Naruto gazed at the picture again, as if trying to discern something from it, before closing his eyes and letting out a soft sigh. Divisions 2, 5, 9 and 12. Commence recon team deployment under protocol. Eagle Eye. Teams are to assume Spectre formation until otherwise commanded. Further orders will be given as the situation develops. Target information is being transmitted now. Yes, sir. Like he had said before, Naruto was certainly not most genin. Chief, target is moving south, bearing 197. Speed has not changed. Should we move to intercept? Negative. Leave it be for now. I think my dear teammate needs another lesson in humility, Naruto answered over the mental link. Understood. The clone commander replied as the link was cut. Hey, I think I see it, Naruto spoke into the radio headset Kakashi had given them as they had split up to find the cat. In retrospect, it was an entirely unnecessary maneuver as the recon teams Naruto deployed had already located the feline as soon as Kakashi had finished passing out the radios and giving them the plan instructions. In fact, Naruto and his clones could have completed this mission completely on their own. But Naruto also knew that Kakashi would never go for that. They were a team. A highly dysfunctional team in Naruto's opinion, but a team nonetheless. And like a team, they had to do these things together. Something that made Naruto wonder if the old man would let him take D-rank missions on his own. With his clones doing the work of several D-ranks at once, he could start raking in a lot of money very easily. And so, Naruto had decided to let his teammates find the animal on their own. I mean, this was supposed to be a kind of training for them, and if he could do it so easily, why take away from their learning experience? That, and it was rather hilarious to watch Sasuke and Sakura run aimlessly around Konoha like headless chickens without a clue where they were going. The whole display made Naruto shake his head in amusement, disappointment, as he was sure Kakashi was as well, wherever he was. He had actually just decided to give them a little hand. Which brings us back to the current situation. Pant. Where? Pant. He heard Sakura, not even trying to hide her exhaustion. I think it's heading south, towards the market district, Naruto answered. I'll be right there, Sasuke said, hiding his panting a bit better. Aren't you something like on the other side of Konoha? I think I could bag it faster? Shut it, Dobi. I'll capture this damn cat. Yeah. Go Sasuke-kun. Okay then, Naruto said before turning off his radio and opening a mental link to his clones. Find Sasuke's location and calculate when and where he should reach the cat. Yes, sir. A few seconds later, the clone responded. Sir, calculations put intercept point roughly 200 meters southwest, bearing 235 in approximately 55 seconds. Understood. Attention Divisions 3, 6 and 7. Deploy interdictor teams to Grid XI-37. Teams are to await further orders upon arrival. Yes, sir. Naruto cut the link as he leapt to the next building, leaping across rooftops at high speed. Somehow, he could tell this was going to be, at the very least, interesting. I love it when I'm right. What Naruto was witnessing now was incredibly funny to say the least. Sasuke Uchiha, Rookie of the Year, and the so-called genius, was getting his ass handed to him by a cat. Said Uchiha was currently running around the empty street like a headless chicken, occasionally running into a trash can or telephone pole. The reason being that his vision was obscured by the cat that seemed to be trying to rip his face off. While Tora had at first appeared like a simple scared cat on the run, the minute Sasuke had come running at it, it had seemingly transformed into a feral predator. Sakura looked on in shock and terror, but somehow continuing to cheer her beloved Uchiha on. Kakashi seemed to be ignoring the situation while reading his porn from under a nearby awning. Naruto was filming with a camera, a wicked grin on his face. Sakura, who now just seemed to notice Naruto, suddenly screamed to him. "Naruto, you baka! Don't just stand there, help him!" Naruto didn't even give her a glance. "No, goddammit Naruto. Go help him. That thing's hurting Sasuke-kun." Now Naruto did glance towards her as he spoke, but in a lower, more exasperated tone. "I'm sorry, I've contracted, I don't care, shut up." Sakura looked about ready to start to try to pummel Naruto again. Keyword. Try, when Sasuke was finally able to rip the cat off his now thoroughly mauled face. The cat landed gracefully on its feet and was instantly running off. Of course, this immediately grabbed Sakura's attention, and she was almost instantly at Sasuke's side asking him if he was okay, to which he merely stood up and shoved her away from him. "Wow, I can understand me beating the crap out of you, but getting your ass handed to you by a cat. Man Sasuke, for all your egotistical babble, you're not much of a rookie of the year." "Shut up," Sasuke growled. "And where's my headband?" he asked as he noticed that the symbol of his shinobi status had been knocked off in the tussle. "I thought you were a type of mustard," Naruto asked in a curious tone. "Huh? Like I said, I thought you were a type of mustard," Naruto repeated, as if it was nothing odd. "What?" Sasuke asked, his face once again assuming the WTF expression. "I like spaghetti too." "Wait, what?" Sasuke stammered, trying to make sense of what Naruto was saying, as well as Sakura, who was just as confused. "It's over there," Naruto said, pointing behind them. "What? The spaghetti?" Sasuke asked, thinking he might have finally gotten the insane blonde's routine. "No, your headband, apparently not. The answer to your other question is, that's right, you didn't." "I didn't have another question." "That's right, you didn't." "Naruto, just shut up." "What? You're just jealous because you thought it was funny and shrubberies can be an essential part of a person's diet and make excellent pets." Blank stares. "You know it's true," as everyone was giving him the, "is he insane?" look again. Naruto got a message from one of his captains. "Chief, the target has changed course. It's circling around towards the market district. It'll be pretty hard to track in there. Permission to intercept." "Permission granted, Rex. I'm on my way, yes sir." "This is too easy," Naruto thought as he leaned against a chimney. The cat had gotten up the rooftops and, thanks to the very dense housing in this area of Konoha, was easily dashing along, chased by a squad of his clones. Naruto meanwhile, was lying in wait with about 5 times that many, waiting for the cat to get in close enough for them to spring their trap. This was how you retrieved a cat. "All right Rex, just a little more, Wedge, get ready to move in." "Sir." Naruto smirked as the cat approached, Rex and his squad close behind. Gathering chakra to his feet, Naruto prepared to leap at the cat. Now, with that, Naruto released the chakra in his feet in a burst of speed, shooting forward in front of the cat, flanked by Wedge and the other clones. The cat froze in place as Naruto and his clones stood in front of it, a victorious smirk on their faces. Then it did something none of them were expecting. It hissed loudly and jumped on Naruto. Caught off guard, Naruto tried to move away, preventing the cat from latching on his face like it had to Sasuke, but it still seemed to grip onto his shirt, and made a swipe at the blonde's face. Naruto grimaced slightly as he felt the stinging pain of the claws across his face, then again. In a reflexive rage, Naruto released a blast of ki at the creature, causing it to finally leap off of him and take off like the Shinigami himself was after its soul. Rex and Wedge made to go after it, but it seemed to already be gone. The entire altercation had taken place in a few seconds, and some of the clones were still frozen in shock at the cat's ferocity. "Damn it!" Naruto swore as he wiped the small amount of blood from his face, the wounds already healed by Kyuubi. It was then that he noticed something. Something very, very grave. As he wiped his face clean of blood, he became aware of a certain dampness on his shirt. Right where the cat had been clinging. A dampness that smelled quite repulsive. Chief," Rex began as he noticed it, and Naruto looking at it with widened eyes, "is that?" "Yes Rex, I do believe it is," Naruto spoke in a dark, guarded tone, and all of the clones around him began to shiver at it. They knew that tone. A tone that promised much pain and suffering to whatever had called it forth. It meant only one thing. They weren't talking to Naruto anymore. Antheros was here. And from the redness that had bled into Naruto's eyes, he was pissed. Slowly bringing his left hand to the same ear, Naruto concentrated chakra, communicating in the same dark, haunting tone that was all the scarier from its subtlety. Divisions 11 and 13, deploy the STAHKER teams, protocol. Harbinger, proceed with level. Omega. I want that thing's head by 1300 hours, is that clear? Crystal, sir, came a low voice that seemed to be brimming with eagerness. Tora the cat had best begin its will. So many, too many. The dark-haired one, the one with a black chicken for hair, it had been no consequence, no problem, just like all the others, but the other. The blonde, the monster, the kitsune, it had chased her, they had chased her. Stalked her like a hungry predator. Gone they were, she had fled the kitsunes, fled to the secret spot. Her secret spot, her place of rest, of hiding, where no one had found her before, her sanctuary. She was safe, shivered at the thought of the kitsunes, of their leader, the monster, reek of evil, of hate. Different he was, different from all the others, terror, that's what he was, a monster. Among the trees, safe she was, no, not safe, not yet, not till she reaches her true sanctuary. The glade, the hidden place, the clearing, only she knew of. Finally here, now she can relax, so beautiful, she would rest here, until leaving again, food she would need to find, danger she was in outside. But not in here, no one would ever find her here, the trees, great and mighty, they would shield her, as they always had. The colors, so pretty, the blues of the flowers, the greens of the trees, their greens and browns and flash of dark orange. Wait, dark orange, orange flashes, circling the glade, just beyond her vision. The feeling, the terror, no, she had been found, by the kitsunes. The kitsunes had found her, terror, pure terror, couldn't move, couldn't breath, so much terror, pairs crimson dots staring out from the trees, of predators. Ran she did, desperate to get away, they would kill her, destroy her, and feast on her flesh. A great roar, the sky raining fire, fire all around. Fire, fire everywhere, all around her, on the trees, on the ground, in a great circle, a circle of fire, a circle of hell. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, the terror, the fear, greater than ever. Her heart, being crushed, her lungs, being dried, her stomach, being churned. They stepped out of the shadows, gazing down with unholy eyes, just beyond the flames, the kitsunes, the monsters. No, no monsters, demons, terrible demons from hell, kitsune demons. Now she understands, the blonde, the leader, the Kyuubi. The great demon lord, she has angered him, now, his legions he has sent, to destroy her for her insolence. No hope she has, no peace she can have, so much fear, so much terror. Steel flew, the knives of steel, prepared she tries to be, to embrace the cold darkness. But nothing comes, no knives strike her, all around her they are, close, but not in her. Why, is he sparing her, hopeful she becomes, perhaps, survive she will. The knives begin to glow, what is this, what is he doing? The roar returns, the sky rains fire once again. The fire, coming right at her, the great balls of fire. The steel glows brighter, bright light, fire, burning, pain, so much pain. Fur incinerated, skin melted, no hope, please, let it end. Let it end, let it end, let it end, she knows not but pain, and sorrow. The demon lord has come for her, he had come for her soul. The demon has come, he has been slighted, he has been wronged. He has been angered, he has come, and demons are not to be crossed. The hot steel cuts through her neck, oblivion takes her in its cold stare. No peace she shall know, in that eternity of fire and sorrow. Naruto smirked darkly as he watched the pillar of burning fire. The once peaceful clearing had been reduced to a burning wasteland. No way that infernal creature had survived, that he thought with a cackle. The STAHKER commander landed next to him, breaking him from his evil laugh. Well, Fordo? Mission accomplished, sir, the demonic-looking blonde replied. A dark and evil smirk planted on his face too as he held up the charred, severed head of Tora the cat. The other hand was brought to his forehead at an angle with the hand itself flat in a strange, to anyone else, salute. Taking the severed head, Naruto looked at it with an evil and amused stare, holding it in his hand. Alas, poor Fluffy. I hated thee, and that's why you're dead. With that, Naruto broke out into an overly dramatic evil cackle, the STAHKER teams laughing in a similar tone. Behind the cackling blonde, Rex, Wedge and the other Recon clones shivered slightly at the sight of their commander and the Special Forces clones. STAHKER. Specialized and Tactical Advanced Hunter, Killer, Extermination and Reconnaissance. These clones were the latest in the Chief's arsenal of terror and mayhem that was Kage Bunshin, and probably the scariest. They were Naruto's version of Konoha's Anbu Black Ops. The Elite Special Forces. Clones formed by Naruto himself by using Kyuubi's Yuki. The result being a group of clones that were naturally stronger and more powerful than any other under the Chief's control. And they were prone to be a bit more psychotic too. Ahahahahaha. Okay, I need to stop doing that, Naruto said as he finally finished his maniacal laughter and got a hold on himself. Tossing the head to Wedge, Naruto began barking out orders. Wedge, get that to MNC. I want it stuffed and mounted by the end of tomorrow. Yes, sir. The clone replied as he caught the head and he and his squad saluted before sunshining away. The rest of you, head back to base, he continued as he turned to the STAHKER teams. Sir. They saluted before sunshining themselves. Rex, I want you and your squad to remain here. Keep my teammates occupied until I get back here with our stand-in from R&D. Stand-in, sir? The captain asked, a bit confused. What? You didn't think I completely lost it back there, did you? Give me some credit, Rex. Don't worry, I've got everything under control. Yes, sir. Whatever you say, sir, the clone said as he saluted, still a bit confused as to what his commander and creator was planning. Great. I'll be back soon with the target, Naruto replied as he vanished with his own shunshin. Feeling a little miffed at being left out of the loop like that, Rex gathered his squad together as he barked out orders. Well, at least this might be interesting, the end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next part.